So here's the deal. This story is about a guy who, amongst a mountain of cheap junk, found a very valuable and unique item. This item is small and inconspicuous. However, its value is decent, 4,280 coins. The young man asked how much he could buy the item he had immediately spotted among a pile of useless trash. The elderly salesman was too engrossed in a strong hot drink. That's why he couldn't give a clear answer right away. The old man finally broke away from the bottle. Then, in a hoarse voice, he replied that the thing mentioned was worth 5,000. His speech was unintelligible. The nimble young man said he was willing to give 500 coins. He probably knew how to bargain. The stoned salesman claimed he wasn't quite drunk yet, and he was sure his goods were worth much more. He wanted 1,000 coins. The young man immediately agreed to buy the item for the price offered. He was probably satisfied with the purchase. The market traders were sure that the young man was very naive and foolish. After all, he had paid 1,000 coins for a thing that had previously been bought for only 50 coins. They had no idea that they could have earned much more. The happy and excited young man rushed through the market like a young stallion. He did not even feel tired. The lucky man decided to stop. From the joy and the flurry of emotions, he couldn't breathe fully. Luck was on his side. He thanked the goddess Fortuna for helping him once again. It was too easy for a guy to get what he wanted, and that made him a little upset. He decided to savor his tidbit once more. He put his hand in his pocket, but it was empty. A shiver ran through his body. We have to look everywhere carefully. After all, the guy remembered that he definitely took the purchased goods to the seller. There was a short circuit in my head. The brain refused to work properly. Did treacherous luck slip out of the guy's hands? When and where was the item lost? A valuable purchase was found in his left pocket. We need to calm down and get the system up and running immediately. The guy was on full alert. System startup was underway. Reality was disappearing. A rapid immersion into the virtual world began. The system was successfully connected. Now it was necessary to select one of the proposed targets. Next, you need to check what riches are available. A good inventory greatly accelerates the achievement of the desired dream. There were many items here. In particular, an unusual pumpkin, an unfinished dragon statue, silver earrings, and even a damaged pot. But first of all, we needed money. So the guy decided to sell all these things. The young man did not doubt his decision. His hand did not waver when he confirmed the sale of the things he held dear. There have been new achievements. In particular, budget housing was provided. The happy lad was drowning in money and his own tears of joy. In an instant, he had earned more than his uncle. A great success emboldens us. The main character has an unbridled desire to move on and develop. Being successful and self-sufficient is a strong desire that is hard to curb. Perhaps it is not necessary to suppress this desire. You just need to move forward and diligently engage in self-improvement. You're dizzy with happiness. You'll be in the seventh heaven in no time. The guy was sure that he had received an influx of powerful inner energy. Now he was able to perform miracles. This gesture probably means that the muscles of the arms have become stronger and more robust. Although the guy's stoned out of his mind. It's hard to predict his thoughts and understand the hidden meaning of this gesture. And another award. Fortune's favorite has received a new honorary title. The boy's mood changed in an instant. He became darker than a shadow. It seemed to be his reaction to his new title. Garbage was the guy's title at this point. He had to perform some important feat to get rid of this unsound title. But changing a title isn't easy. It requires great wealth. The amount of money to acquire a new title was exorbitant. However, no one wants to be trash. Therefore, we need to think of something to create a more attractive image. You need to carefully weigh every step you take. After all, rash actions can leave you broke. Movement is life, and life is movement. It is impossible to go backwards in any case. It is necessary to move forward and successfully fulfill a new mission, which will help to get out of the garbage. The brave young man realized that after successful completion of the mission, he could get points for self-improvement. To become better, stronger, cooler. That was his main task. All the points earned, the young dreamer wanted to use them to improve his body. Then he would be stronger and more attractive. The goal of the next mission is to collect a whole barrel of gold. But first, you need to find at least a bucket of the yellow precious metal. Some deserted, gloomy street. I wonder if there's a yellow devil hidden here, guarded by ghosts. There were only banal modern items and mediocre jewelry around. You can't make much money from them. The cunning fellow knew that antiques were the shortest way to untold riches. For example, ancient jade is very highly valued. It is possible to find unique items in this small old market. It is not uncommon to find some very precious surprises among the junk. Money's tight. so you can't buy a lot of stuff. The yellow devil began to tempt more strongly. The desire to earn the first bucket of gold increased rapidly. Suddenly, an additional quest popped up. Its main goal is to find and purchase high-quality goods near you. There were hardly any shoppers here, so the merchants could enjoy sleep and silence. There were many items with wood made by carpenters from the nearest village. It was artistic hand-carving. All the merchandise is substandard, the usual cheap trinkets. But suddenly the buyer saw something very unique and expensive. He was consumed by a great desire to get his hands on the goods he saw. Everything necessary and valuable may be around, but not everyone is able to notice the real value of a thing. This ring immediately attracted the young man's attention. He could not take his eyes off it. This unique ring was made of dense wax, especially for the Ming dynasty. It could have belonged to the emperor himself. The ring was made about 200 years ago. Its value is more than 380,000 yuan. I guess the lucky guy made another big score. Fate always helps the brave and determined. Now we've got to get our hands on the goods. And the guy seems to have come up with a cunning plan to get what he wants. The passionate desire for the ring was driving the poor man unconscious. He was losing control of himself. The good-natured merchant became worried. He thought the customer had a bad stomach upset, and there wasn't even a toilet nearby. The boy was caught in the grip of his desire. The desire was so great that it made it hard to breathe. The bewildered boy decided to forget about the ring for a moment and get away from it. But it literally stuck to his hands. The customer tried his best to remain indifferent, but a volcano of unbridled emotion was erupting inside him. The young burnout tried to shift his attention to other goods, but his speech was restless and his smile strained. The kind-hearted old man was willing to sell anything for nothing. He must have gotten tired of this boring trade. The buyer tried to remain calm. He continued to scrutinize various items. The merchant was ready to give away several things at once for a penny. Perhaps he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to sell anything at all in a day. But the dodgy rogue was in no hurry to say anything. Probably a new cunning plan was brewing in his mind. The young swindler deliberately continued to stall for time. And during this time he managed to think up a way to get the precious ring easily and cheaply. Suddenly the rascal asked for the price of each item. He was ready to buy all the goods. This was the first time a merchant wanted to buy all things wholesale. Therefore, he was too dumbfounded. The soft-hearted merchant was frightened and discouraged the boy from buying all the goods. The soft-hearted merchant was afraid and discouraged the boy from buying all the goods. I had to say something to the old man, so as not to arouse his suspicions. The ring must be obtained at any cost. Crook continued to play the role of a naive guy. He said he wanted to buy all the things just for himself. The benevolent uncle said he would give all his goods for 2,000 yuan. And this price suited the young rascal perfectly. The guy took pity on the simple-minded merchant, gave him more money than he should have. However, the old man was too decent. He refused to take more money than he should. Sometimes you really want to take something, but my conscience won't let me. The crafty man said that the wood carvings were quite unique and valuable, so he purchased the entire item. But what he really wanted was the precious ring. The clever fox promised that he would continue to buy various village things. After all, he is very interested in handicrafts. The naive uncle believed the words of the cunning trickster. He was in an Empyrean state of joy. Lukavek pretended not to say goodbye to his uncle, but inside he was impatient to get out of the market as quickly as possible with a valuable and successful purchase. Finally, the merchant is gone. Now we can relax. The mask is off. Now there is no need to hide true emotions and unbridled joy. Lucky was pleased with himself. He had gotten what he wanted. Lucky has completed the additional quest successfully. From now on, he gains the ability to quickly scan things and recognize their true quality. But for now, this scanning is only possible within a radius of 5 meters. In no time at all, my body went through some strange metamorphosis, and it takes some getting used to. The young man's eyes changed. Or perhaps it was the esoteric third eye that opened. The boy had poor eyesight. He could see clearly now. From now on, the young man saw everything differently. The world was filled with new colors and possibilities. The guy immediately realized that the girl's bracelet was made of solid gold, and its price was 3,900 yuan. And this is a brass ring. Its price is 25 yuan. The surprised boy was pleased that he could now easily evaluate things. In particular, he was able to determine what an object was made of, what its real quality was, and what the real price was. With such extraordinary abilities, you can feel like a very cool and successful person. You can also make a lot of money. Someone disturbed a guy's happy solitude. They won't let him enjoy his new gift in peace. Out of nowhere, girls in strange outfits appeared. They were angry that the smug guy wasn't paying any attention to them. The beauties were very seductive, one more beautiful than the other. The agitated boy tried to pull himself together. After all, from now on he was a tough guy and had to keep his cool in any situation. A cocky guy decided to play the macho role. Carelessly called one of the girls a baby. The interviewee was indignant. She stated that she did not consider herself a little girl, as she was in secondary school. The angry girl seemed even cuter to the boy, so he kept teasing her. Oddly enough, some women want to look older, and they resent being called small. A tiny beauty complained to her older sister that she was being bullied, and asked her to punish the bully. The affectionate girl tried to appease the anger of her angry younger sister, Tang Tang. She said that everything would be fine, no need to worry about nothing. The girl's eyes could not tear herself away from the conceited stranger. I guess this guy had something to interest her. Out of the blue, the girl demanded that the guy give her something. It was like racketeering in broad daylight. The bewildered boy wondered. Was he being asked to give up his chastity? But as it turns out, Lady X wasn't interested in the young man's virginity. She specified that she wanted the ring. Finally, the guy began to realize what the pretty girl wanted. He asked why he had to give the ring to someone. The extortionist blushed heavily. She said, embarrassed, that she just wanted to look at the ring. The smug wit replied that he didn't have any ring. Instead, he offered the beauty his hand and heart. The smarmy Tang Tang enjoyed the unfamiliar uncle's hilarious performance. She thought the mocker was quite hilarious. The older sister, however, was annoyed by the witty jokes of the wit. But she was afraid of being too rude to the ruffian. After all, she was eager to get the mysterious ring. Mary realized that not everyone understood his jokes, and he was even slightly frightened by the beauty's frowning face. A child should be given a toy, and then he won't furrow his eyebrows and get angry. The long-awaited toy is in hand. Now it must be thoroughly explored. The self-confident guy calmly watched the girl scrutinize the ring. He was pleased to be the owner of such a valuable thing. Suddenly the homogon asked that the girl not dare to run anywhere with the ring. Otherwise he would take her little sister away. The gullible Tang Tang became furious. She called the joker a big bad wolf. The varmint didn't seem to take offense at being called the big bad wolf. He liked to tease the guileless girl. Immediately the big bad wolf said he would take Tang Tang to his burrow. There she would do his laundry, clean his house, and make him delicious food and tea. Almost all of us once believed in fairy tales. Tantan also believed that a dire wolf wanted to kidnap her. Over the years, we have lost the ability to dream, to believe in magic and fairy tales. And we can only fondly remember our childhood, the world to which we will never return. He liked the little girl's sincerity and straightforwardness. It was exactly what adults often lacked. It turns out that the stranger had been watching the guy for a long time, and she noticed that he was extremely carelessly looking at different objects. But when he saw the ring, he could not tear himself away from it. The pushy girl wanted to keep the guy any way she could. After all, a ring can be quite valuable. So she suddenly declared that she wanted to buy this thing. The aplomb guy stated that he could sell the ring. However, no discounts are going to be made. The girl was surprised that the guy quickly agreed to sell her the ring. Everything in this world is bought and sold. Everything has its price and value. The stubborn girl was sure she could buy the ring. The reluctant buyer offered exorbitant sums. But Hermes, the god of commerce, was unperturbed and unwavering. Finally, the girl offered 100,000 yuan. But even this amount did not interest the lord of the ring. The fierce haggling continued. But Hermes did not want to sell the goods. The girl was clearly confused. She asked the guy to name his price. The guy said that the girl did not know the true value of the thing she wanted to buy, and he was sure that the buyer had no idea what the true origin of the ring was. The girl was stumped. She really knew nothing about the real value and origin of the mysterious ring. Suddenly, the restless Tang Tang dragged her Uncle Lu along for some reason. The older man could barely keep up with the little girl. The restless tattletale asked her uncle to punish the big bad wolf. After all, the wolf wants to kidnap her and make her his maid. The older sister didn't expect to see her relative here. She was extremely surprised when she saw him. Uncle Lu seemed to be a very shrewd and intelligent man. His hair was lightly decorated with gray. The niece came to Nanhu and didn't even stop by to visit her uncle. That upset the man a little. The girl admitted that at first she wanted to go to the market to find something interesting, and now she wants to buy a ring. The man agreed to help his favorite niece evaluate the goods, although there was no great excitement in his eyes. The uncle told the little girl that he would take care of some important matters, and then they would go out to eat. The boy quietly waited for the relatives to exchange pleasantries. But suddenly Uncle Lu turned his attention to him. He didn't believe that there might be something quite valuable about this guy. A man has been visiting this market for 20 years, and he has never noticed anything surprising or expensive here. However, the man's self-confidence evaporated in an instant. He was extremely surprised. Dao Ying's niece shows off the ring. Will Uncle be able to recognize its true origin and value? The man loved antiques, and I think he was beginning to realize that he had an extraordinary piece in his hands. Many people were also interested in the ring. They were eagerly waiting to see what the experts' conclusions would be. The man said the ring was made over 200 years ago. It's not in the best condition now, though. Dao Ying was primarily interested in the cost of the ring. After all, some inner voice told her that she should buy it. Uncle Lu suggested that the ring might be worth more than 150,000 yuan. However, we need to check its durability. The taste of victory is delicious, but to taste it, one must fight to the end. Du Ying didn't give up and offered 180,000 yuan. The smell of big money attracted other people. They watched the bargaining with bated breath. People thought the guy was stupid for refusing such a colossal sum. He should take the money and run away for a longer time. Not everyone is so lucky in life. Uncle Lu said he was an antique appraiser, and he was sure the ring couldn't be sold for more, because that's its real value. The nonchalant guy said he never wanted to sell the ring. It's very dear to him. The antiques appraiser was sure the ring wasn't worth more than that. However, why is the guy stubborn and wants to keep it? The girl was getting excited. The desire to get the ring was getting bigger and bigger. She offered 200,000 yuan. The sum was exorbitant and mind-boggling. Everyone would like to be in the place of the Lord of the Ring. The guy pretended he wasn't interested in money at all. The most important thing for him was the ring. Such indifference to money further fueled the girl's excitement. The wise uncle was himself at an impasse. There was nothing he could advise his dear niece. The antique appraiser was annoyed that the ring lord was being too impertinent. Uncle was burning with anger, but teasing was the young rascal's favorite hobby. He clearly enjoyed being the center of attention of the dumbfounded audience. Uncle Lu said that his patience was not unlimited. He said that the foolish trickster would regret the loss of a very substantial sum of money. The niece tried to calm her uncle down. She also said that she was ready to buy the ring at the price offered by the guy. The stubborn man agreed to give his assessment of the goods. After all, he had information that was not available to ordinary people. The ring was actually made of a mixture of dense wax extracted from the depths of the Chinese Sea. The unique and long-forgotten technique of making this item was only known to a few imperial craftsmen. And maybe the ring belonged to Emperor Renzong. Deep knowledge of the guy very surprised the experienced appraiser of antiques. He did not even think that some young man could possess such little-known information. The smug guy said that the ring was a huge treasure of the Ming dynasty, and he didn't want to sell an item that could become a great asset to the history of the entire nation. The evil one was triumphant. He could easily and quickly put tons of noodles in other people's ears. The trickster had told a fictitious story about the ring. The crafty guy said the antiques appraiser and his niece just want to rob him and embezzle what should be the property of the whole nation. Uncle Lu recognized that the boy's grades and explanations were excellent. He began to feel sad that he was losing his knowledge, skills, and abilities over the years. Sometimes children are more perceptive than adults. Tiny Tang Tang immediately realized that the big bad wolf was lying and overcharging. Suddenly, Dao Ying decided to go all in. She offered 1,000,000 yuan. Can the guy resist such a temptation? Envy is a negative and destructive feeling that leads to negative emotions and low self-esteem. It was this feeling that ate away at the people around him like a huge worm. They were all passionate about getting 1,000,000 yuan. Our protagonist was also dumbfounded by the amount offered. He did not even expect that someone would give him such money for the ring. The boy could barely breathe with excitement, but he tried to stay calm, and he asked if the girl really wanted to buy the ring for that price. Dao Ying was too confident and serious. She repeated once again that she wanted to buy 1,000,000 yuan ring. Sometimes you can overstep your unshakable principles when it comes to big money. Lukovets was happy to sell the heritage of a great nation's history. Little Tang Tang wondered why the scary wolf had suddenly become sweet and generous. She liked him better that way. However, it's not that simple. Dao Ying not only wanted to buy the ring, but also wanted to make a certain deal with the guy. The red-haired rascal would do anything for 1,000,000 yuan. He could even marry a girl. Tang Tang protested. She didn't want a big bad wolf to be their son-in-law, and she wouldn't give her older sister to anyone. This particular card has 1,000,000 yuan on it. Now the money's in the guy's hands. The girl handed over the card, but she never said what kind of deal she wanted to make with the guy. Strange doe. In reminded him that she would be waiting for the guy here at 8 in the morning. She asked him not to be late. The girl's behavior was too bizarre and mysterious. Why didn't she say at once what kind of deal she wanted to make? It's hard to think about someone or something when you're holding a card with $1,000,000. Fortune is once again spoiling its favorite. The guy couldn't hold back a smile. Manna from heaven suddenly fell on his head. The local gangsters were jealous of the red-haired guy. Now they won't let him out of their sight. After all, the villains also want to get their hands on the $1,000,000. The wolf smelled that he was being hunted. He decided to get away as quickly as possible. In fact, the young dreamer wasn't really thinking about money. He was more concerned with how many points he could earn in his game and how much he could improve. The guy already had 63 unallocated points. Not a bad result. But I don't think I have enough points. It should be 100. You've earned $1,000,000. The boy couldn't understand where the other points had gone. He began to read the rules of the game carefully. It's hard to figure out on your own. You should ask for a hint. Scores, ranks, points. What complicated statistics, especially for those who didn't study math very well. The bewildered boy realized only one thing. He had 63 points. Otherwise, he trusted the system. But the system cheated. You had to earn $1,000,000 again to get the title of millionaire. It was really annoying. But why resent it? Luck is always there. And fortune has never cheated a lucky man. All the points earned, the red-haired lanky man decided to invest in his own body. If you slowly invest points in physical self-improvement, you can become a Superman. That was the skinny guy's ultimate dream. Definitely should get stronger, faster, and more resilient. That's so cool. The young dreamer thoughtlessly gave all the points to develop his own physical data. Relax, breathe deeply, and we feel a powerful force flowing into the body. A miracle was about to happen. The muscles would become stronger. An inexhaustible source of vitality would rush through the body. But instead of a powerful influx of colossal strength, the guy felt only a terrible fatigue. He was also too irritated. After all, the system must have cheated him. A child was promised candy and then taken away. The little boy is hysterical. The system advised the guy to get plenty of rest. After all the points had been spent. The happy guy realized that after a full rest, a long-awaited miracle would happen and a huge power would awaken in him. And the day had been hard. He really should rest. The boy quickly caught a cab. Now, first of all, it was necessary to find a place to rest. A young rich man decided to stay in the most luxurious hotel. After all, he had $1,000,000. For decent money, they'll take you to the end of the world in no time. The young bigwig was quickly at his resting place. Rich guys are loved and respected here. The service is top-notch. The girls greeted the dear guest with fake smiles. At any moment, they were ready to advise and help. The girls' smiles were strained and fake. They were supposed to show unbridled joy at the arrival of a new guest. The guy cared too much about his own physical development. He even forgot to buy decent clothes, as a rich man should. Poverty here evokes anger and contempt in most people. After all, this is the world of the rich. The child was glad that he could have a full vacation in a posh hotel. There was glamour and splendor everywhere. The pretty cleaning lady was surprised by the naivety and simplicity of the young man. She had never noticed such clients here before. Almost everyone here is a zealous servant of mammon. The staff was very greedy and unfriendly to poor people. How can you relax and have a full rest in this serpentarium? Everyone looks at you with contempt. The sour faces are annoying. Only the pretty cleaning lady was glad to see the young guest. She was like a ray of light in this gloomy ball of hypocrisy. The frail cleaning lady kindly invited the guy to the hotel. She was quite nice and kind-hearted. Kindness is the sun that warms the human soul. And such a sun in this hotel was the young cleaning lady. But the doorman turned out to be a real Cerberus. He banned the guy from the hotel. The disgusting, fearsome Cerberus looked at the new guest incredulously. He was trying to find out why the scruffy tramp had come to them. The doorman's duplicitous behavior was too annoying. The guy didn't understand why he couldn't enter the hotel in worn shoes. The red-haired guy reminded me that guests should be treated with more respect. Even if they didn't have expensive cars and fancy clothes, it is difficult to prove anything to selfish people. They believe only in mammon. So I had to pull out the main trump card. Money. The annoyed guy said you shouldn't judge a book by its cover alone, and called the doorman a hypocritical dog. The angry fellow threw the money at the Cerberus like a piece of fat meat. Then he ordered a decent room to be found for him. At the hotel, the guy saw the kind-hearted cleaning lady again. She was modest and slightly shy. The guest wanted to get a better look at the man who had politely welcomed him here. In a place like this, gracious, affectionate people are rare. Suddenly, a strange guest gave the cleaning lady a tip. That's just for being polite and cordial. The guest had 10,000 yuan in his hands. This is a colossal amount of money for a poor man. The cleaning lady flatly refused to accept such gratitude. But the customer's wish is the law, and a simple cleaning lady dare not contradict an honored guest. The guy said that the cleaning lady was the only person here who didn't judge him for his cheap and dirty clothes. She also showed him a lot of respect, despite the fact that he came in a cab instead of a luxury car. Judging someone by their clothes or their background is stupid. Only people with a heart of stone and an extremely limited worldview do that. Suddenly, the hotel manager, who smelled big money, rushed in. He flew as fast as a vulture on carrion. The hypocritical lackey was afraid that the rich guest would leave them. So with tears in his eyes, he asked for another chance to make amends to the staff. The smug fellow was instantly transformed into an honorable prince. He calmly and confidently asked to be given the presidential suite immediately. There was no doubt that the guest was not poor. But no one could think that the guy would book the most expensive room. After all, the cost of this room is 20,000 yuan per night. The young waster carelessly handed the manager a thick wad of money. It was payment for the presidential suite and tips for the staff. The self-confident rich man heard someone calling him. He turned his head. The bewildered cleaning lady thanked the rich man for the very generous tip. She had never held such a huge amount of money in her hands before. How good it is that there are kind people. They are the ones who warm our world with their warmth. At last, there is an opportunity to be alone with yourself in a luxurious room. There is no need to hurry anywhere, and you can enjoy a carefree life. The media instantly spread the news that a little-known rich man had been given a lifetime VIP membership at the famous Zhanghu Hotel. The corridor attendant was fired, and the young trainee cleaner was promoted to concierge manager. The news of the press was of little interest to the handsome man now. He just wanted to enjoy a luxurious and rich life. For a moment the boy relaxed and forgot about everything he was dreaming about. His head was resting from his thoughts. But there's no such thing as lying under a rock. You should immediately invest points in your own physical improvement. All the points earned were spent. An inexplicable metamorphosis began. At first, the transformation was incredibly pleasant. My body felt weightless. A pleasant warmth spread throughout my body. A powerful life energy filled every cell of the body. Suddenly there was a short circuit. It felt the exact opposite. The process of reincarnation was accompanied by intense hellish pain. It was a pain that permeated my entire body. The process of transformation could not be stopped. The only thing left to do was to scream wildly and uncontrollably. Werewolves are not to be envied. Their bodies regularly succumb to transformation. But our protagonist was not a werewolf, and this was the first time he had ever been transformed. However, from behind the dark gray clouds, the sun is bound to come out someday. And the world is filled with bright rainbow colors. The birds are singing merrily. The pain was gone. The boy lay immovable and felt completely at peace. His soul and mind were serene. The horrible stench prevents the guy from meditating and enjoying the tranquility. Where is this unpleasant odor coming from? The source of the foul odor turned out to be the guy's body. He was covered in a sticky, dark gray slime. It must have been the after-effects of reincarnation. The frightened boy could not understand what had happened to his long-suffering body. And what was the use of such metamorphosis? I need a shower now. Otherwise you could suffocate from the stench. The mucus slowly washed away. The unpleasant odor disappeared. The jubilant guy saw a handsome man in the mirror. His pecs, biceps, and triceps had noticeably increased in volume. His arms and legs became stronger. The body was unrecognizable. With such a naked torso, one would not be ashamed to show up on the beach. The guy noticed that his height had increased as well, and he became more attractive. The smug guy got too caught up in his metamorphosis. He even forgot someone was waiting for him. Like it or not, a promise must be kept. After all, a true superhero must always keep his word. The two sisters were already waiting for the guy. Little Tang Tang resented the big bad wolf for being late. The big bad wolf was pleased that two beauties were eagerly waiting for him. Now he could shock them with his excellent body. Raucous applause and ovation, a megastar on the red carpet. Apollo, the god of male beauty, has suddenly fallen from heaven. The slavish staff bows to him and thanks him for staying at their hotel. Looks like Apollo met Venus. It's a good thing. What happened to the aplomb of the god of love? The sisters were annoyed by the long wait and were a little tired. But they remained sweet and attractive. The dumbfounded sisters hardly recognized the transformed boy. How could he change so quickly? The guy was beautiful from top to toe. His gait was confident and energetic. The expensive fancy clothes were dazzling. He was truly an enviable bachelor and a heartthrob. The big bad wolf started teasing the little girl again. It had been 3 days since they'd first met, and the wolf had missed the little girl. Tang Tang said the wolf had changed a lot, but the jaws remained just as nasty. She called the guy a pervert. Dao Ying wasn't interested in useless chatter. She asked the boy to get into the car quickly. In the car, the girl kept thinking about why the former Lord of the Ring had suddenly changed so dramatically. Is such a metamorphosis possible in real life? The unsettled Tang Tang resented the fact that there was a big bad wolf in their auto. Thinks such a predator could eat them quickly and easily. The wolf made some strange growling noises. Its eyes were closed. Tang Tang thought the salivating predator was asleep. However, Little Red Riding Hood was wrong. The wolf was awake. The guy actually scrutinized the system's user interface during the trip. Many functions were incomprehensible. The system had its own market. What's that? At the market, you could see a scroll of repair and a food whitener, and also all sorts of utensils and many different obscure items. The guy had 30 points from somewhere. But it wasn't enough to buy some of the things he was interested in. The car stopped abruptly. What happened? Dreamer quickly logged out. What's that? Tsunami? The guy's face hurt. He wondered for a moment if the girl had a driver's license. But the girl didn't slow down abruptly for nothing. There was a good reason. They were surrounded on all sides by fearsome thugs. The passage was completely blocked. There's nowhere to run, but I want to live. The older sister asked that the guy run away with little Tang Tang at the first opportunity. She believed that the bandits were after her. Therefore, they wouldn't pay much attention to other people. The gangsters ordered Dao Ying to get out of the car immediately. They surrounded the car like bloodthirsty hyenas. The frightened girl planned to divert the attention of the bandits. She asked the boy to take the chance and sneak away with little Tang Tang. The bewildered boy and younger sister were scared, but they were in no hurry to run away without Dao Ying. The girl was brave. However, she was completely defenseless. After all, it is hard to fight against a huge pack of hyenas. The girl tried to bribe the vile scumbags. She promised to pay any amount of money for them to leave them alone, but the bandits only laughed wildly. They were amused by the girl's words. The gang leader said that they have already received a decent amount of money. Now, they have to fulfill their customer's task diligently. It seems that our characters are in danger. Apparently, the bandits have decided to kill them or mutilate them badly. Both are horrible. Dao Ying was not only worried about herself. Above all, the girl wanted her little sister to be alive and well. And she was worried that Tang Tang and the strange guy couldn't get away in time. Undaunted, Tang Tang told the bald bastard that he was a nasty, ill-mannered person. You can't tease girls, let alone beat them up. The suddenly transformed guy declared that no one would suffer at the hands of the disgusting thugs. But why was he so confident? After all, one man can't fight alone. The leader of the hyena pack smiled wryly. He was mentally enjoying the fact that he could quickly and easily wipe out a stubborn antelope. The bald man wanted to squash the bug that was bothering his eyes as quickly as possible. So he began to knead his hands with pleasure. The brave man resembled Buddha in meditation. He seemed to have withdrawn deep into himself and did not notice anyone. The daredevil's behavior surprised the thugs. They thought the guy had lost his mind out of fear. Little Red Riding Hood asked that the big bad wolf not be afraid of anything or anyone. She thought the boy was too scared, and so he closed his eyes. But the wolf behaved calmly. He continued to think stubbornly about something. Little Red Riding Hood could not understand why the wolf was closing his eyes. It was no time to sleep. They are in danger. The guy was completely immersed in the system. He was trying to find something important that would help save their lives. Suddenly, the boy's eyes stopped on something. Could it be that a life preserver for drowning people had been found? And how can this scroll help during a fight? It's not a sword or a gun, is it? It turns out that the scroll can significantly enhance the hero's abilities. However, the enhancement only lasts for a few minutes. The boy spent 30 points on reinforcement in no time, and he began to feel himself filling with tremendous power. The bald bastard was thinking of the best way to punish the naive brave man. The fool's unshakable calmness was too annoying. The gang leader's nerves are frayed. He's about to crush his opponent's skull. There's a sword of Damocles hanging over the guy, or rather a bat. This blow could be deadly. Would the big bad wolf be killed by the leader of a pack of nasty hyenas? It's a sad and gruesome sight. Fortunately, there was no damage to the head. But the upper arm may be broken because of the sheer force of the impact. The bastards were glad to see the boy's bones shattered. Other people's torment is a real pleasure for them. But why are the bandits surprised and frightened? And where has their self-confidence gone? But the young lad didn't even feel any pain, and his bones were all intact. He seemed to be bulletproof. It was a scintillating blow. The bald perp lost his jaw forever. Could have lost his brain if he had one. And now a crushing kick. And the mobster is sent to another galaxy. The small-minded sheep trembled. They had never seen such superpower before. It seemed that it was not a human being, but some omnipotent alien from another planet. After all, an ordinary person could not have such unique abilities. The villains wanted to run away, but they were just numb with fear, like bandalogs in front of the Python Ka. You got a powerful force, you gotta use it to its fullest. It's kind of fun. It's nice to punish evil. You can still enjoy the unique crushing power for 3 minutes, and it's a chance you can't miss. In an instant, the cowardly bandits scattered in different directions. They were like useless ragdolls. The girls were terribly surprised. They had no idea that the all-powerful wolf would be their savior. We had to act quickly and decisively. After all, we would soon run out of strength. The mutilated bandits were crawling like worms. They tearfully begged the Almighty Lord to spare them. The superhero decided not to spread himself too thin. So he focused his attention on the strongest and most authoritative thug. The criminal asked in a trembling voice for his life. He was ready to do anything the superhero ordered. The boy wanted to know who was the mastermind behind this attack. Who hired the bandits? He had to tell the truth quickly, or his leg would be broken. The perp said they were ordered to intercept the car in the morning. Old man Pin Goofy hired them. The anxious Tang Tang was sure that the thief's words were lies. He could not be trusted. Tong Tong's reaction surprised those present. Why didn't she believe the bandit? Dao Ying was visibly worried. She asked to leave this cursed place as soon as possible. The powers will be gone soon. You really should go somewhere safe. But the desire to mock the villain just a little bit was too great. And it was hard to resist. Here's the superhero's final surprise for the thief. Now he's gonna remember it for a long time. And he'll see it in his worst dreams. The criminal with the broken leg was writhing in terrible pain. He must have regretted more than once that he had agreed to fulfill today's order. The fearsome superhero told the bastard never to bother his eyes again. Otherwise, he'd lose his legs altogether. The sun lit the way, and there were no more thugs anywhere. The guy plunged back into the system. He realized that the item store is a pretty cool thing. But you have to earn points so that you can buy useful things. Points can be earned by selling items to the system. 10,000 yuan was only 10 points. The system bought items at a very low price. Money should first of all be spent on personal needs and the necessities of life. And glasses should be used sparingly, only in emergencies. I think we're here. What a picturesque, well-maintained yard. The girl's dwelling was like a castle. 2 rich people live in mansions like this. The hostess invited the guy into her house. The guest was a little surprised because he had never seen such luxury before. The girl asked the guest to rest. Then she promised that she would return quickly. There was no nanny, no maid, no servants of any kind in the house. The girls cooked their own meals, cleaned, did their own laundry. And the boy was extremely surprised by this. Suddenly the wolf asked the little lol if she could cook rice, for he was very hungry. Tan stated that she can use a rice cooker perfectly. She's also great at cooking, washing, and cleaning. So the wolf should not doubt her abilities. The boy promised to eat the whole dinner prepared by the girl. He is curious to taste the food that the little Lowell cooks. Tang Tan had planned to spend the day idly. But she was forced to work, and she was a little annoyed. Tiny Lol agreed to cook dinner. After all, the savior must be thanked. But the fussy guest demanded 3 pots of rice. Tan protested. She said little girls can't cook too much food. The little Lol boiled with anger like a kettle. Her shrill scream filled the whole house. Suddenly, a strange girl appeared. She looked like Aphrodite coming out of the foam of the sea. The boy was dazzled by the ethereal beauty. The fire of love raged in him. Restless Tang complained that a big bad wolf is kidnapping LOL, and then forces them to cook 3 pots of rice. She thought it was a very mean act. The girl's face was slightly mysterious and damn attractive. The guy was losing his sanity from this divine beauty. The girl introduced herself. She said her name was Dunfin Fire. The boy said his name was Yang Ning. He said that he was not as bad as the little lord said he was. Aphrodite was too flirtatious at this point. Suddenly the girl asked if she was beautiful. Yang Ning replied without hesitation that Dongfang Fire was charming, divinely beautiful. But he forgot to add that she was also extremely modest. After all, the unearthly beauty confused his thoughts and made him dizzy. A love fire cannot be extinguished. Emotions run high, passions flare up. The brain refuses to work. The girl liked the guy. She thought he was funny, cute, and attractive. The girl was called by her sister. The love idol was disturbed. Pretty lady said goodbye. She had to hurry to work. The young Don Juan was happy to have met a charming beauty. He hoped that they would see each other again soon. The graceful gait, the perfect physique, the magnetic gaze added fuel to the fire. It was impossible to extinguish the love fire that was raging inside the guy. He was sure that he had met the most beautiful girl on the planet. Her beauty was divine and mind-blowing. The lustful dreamer was hovering too high in the Empyrean. Therefore, Tang Tang decided to urgently bring the evil wolf down to earth. The guy was not happy that his intercourse with the beauty was interrupted. He said that the little LOL had to go cook rice. Tan Tan called the wolf a pervert. The guy resented the fact that the harmful LOL made him look bad in front of the charming beauty. Why did Do-in suddenly call her sister? It seems like she had something very important to discuss. Do-in confessed that Yang Ning had saved her life. Without this guy, she definitely wouldn't have been able to escape from the hands of the thugs. Dongfang Fire was visibly anxious. She was trying to figure out who was the mastermind behind the bandits' attack. Was it really Yan Yun Xuan? Sister assumed that Yan Yun Xuan wished her harm. But he never used the services of bandits. It was beneath his dignity. Zhang Yukang could have been the customer, although it's unlikely. He wouldn't let the criminals mutilate the girls. The sisters were stuck in the maze of their musings for a moment. There were too many suspects. Do Ying's personal driver was also quite suspicious. But he had recently had a close relative die and was too caught up in his mourning. He's not in the mood for revenge right now. The puzzled girl said that the driver was very secretive and mysterious. Recently, Huang Hai suddenly left, where he took his sisters for some reason. Dao Ying thought that the relatives could not have organized the attack because they did not know where she was going. But the driver knew about it. The restless Du Ying was too caught up in her thoughts. For a moment, she even forgot about her sister's presence. Suddenly, Dongfang Fire changed the topic of conversation. She said that her sister had found a very attractive guy. But the blushing Do Ying denied that she had a boyfriend. She claimed that Yang Ning was just a casual acquaintance. Dongfang Fire was surprised why her sister hadn't gotten the handsome bachelor yet. After all, she thought Yang Ning was a real superhero. Then why did Do-in invite a guy to her place? Her actions are always extremely deliberate and unpredictable. The girl confessed that Yang Ning is a candidate for one important contest. After all, this guy has unique knowledge and skills. Do Ying admitted that Yang Ning is an excellent appraiser of antiques, and he can be quite helpful in the competition. A bewildered Dunfen Fire was surprised that a simple guy would represent them in the appraisal contest. After all, it should be done by a person with unique abilities and knowledge. The sisters chirped incessantly. The guest was bored out of his mind. The owners of the house finished their conversation. At last they remembered their guest, two painted beauties, and each with their own unique, enchanting beauty. The bewildered guest began to lose his sanity. He was dazzled by the beauty of the girls. Proud Dao Ying said that she didn't like Yang Ning, so she can put him in her sister's safe hands. Dao Ying said that her sister's name is Dongfang Fire. This beauty is an underwear model. Her favorite hobby is to mock people and tease those around her. Now the lustful guy realized why Dunfan Fire's gait and figure were so seductive. After all, she is a professional model, but is this beauty too conniving? Is such a sweet girl really capable of breaking someone's heart and causing mental anguish? She seemed very kind. The temptress suddenly asked who was more beautiful than her or Du Ying. The question was too direct and unexpected. The naive catcher replied without hesitation that Dunfan Fire was the most beautiful girl in the universe. Her beauty could drive any man crazy. The young Donjuan's words greatly annoyed Du Ying. She wasn't sure if the guest was speaking sincerely. Intoxicated with beauty, the young wife-lover didn't really know who was prettier. Both girls seemed attractive. But at the moment, he was unable to think straight and choose the right words. The smug Dongfang Fire was over the moon. Once again, she was told that she was the most beautiful. Suddenly the lady's man declared that he would consider his wife the most beautiful, and she would be his most precious treasure. Dao-in was annoyed by the idle chatter and exchange of pleasantries. She must have been thinking about something important. Dunfan Fire thought that the young seducer was married, and that upset her a little. The restless seducer assured me that he was a bachelor, and at least now he was ready to start dating a beautiful girl and give her his love. The cunning Dongfang Fire whispered that her sister was very much offended. After all, Yang Ning was too reckless and tactless. Every girl explicitly or secretly wants to be the most beautiful and desirable. However, the catcher didn't give up. He kept insisting that Dongfang Fire was the most beautiful and sweetest. The cunning fox received a huge portion of compliments and was very pleased. But suddenly, the sly girl declared that she likes guys who are much older than her, so she can't date a very young Ning. The unwise catcher was knocked out. He was discarded like an unwanted, cheap, broken toy. His heart was shattered. The wolf was a little irritated and hungry. He immediately tried to swallow all the delicious dishes that were on the table. Tang Tang thought for a moment that the guy is actually not a big bad wolf. He's the ultimate rude pig. The dire wolf turned out to be quite insolent and demanding. He ordered the little lowly to wash the dishes to a mirror shine. Dao-ying tried to get into a serious conversation, but the guest listened carelessly to everything she told him. The insatiable guest continued to fill his stomach. He has a truly wolfish appetite. His mouth was busy, so he was reluctant to talk about the appraisal of antiques. The arch-serious girl was trying to prove that the case was not as simple as it might seem at first glance. Therefore, you should not be so dismissive of her words. Shoeless Du-Ying narrated that the Linjia family controls 3 auction houses. It is a huge source of economic income for some countries. But this family also has quite a few serious competitors. Representatives of the Linjia family participate in a competition in which items are judged. This competition is very important. The Authoritative Antiques Association, the Jade Association, and the Collectors Association are at the origin of the competition. All appraisers are very popular and reputable people. It is not uncommon for different companies to try to bribe them. But the Linjia family has always been impartial and incorruptible. The unintelligent girl was angry, for her words seemed to fly past the ears of the voracious guest. Gluttony smugly declared that he would win this contest. But one thing he wanted to know was how he would benefit from this endeavor. The confused girl didn't understand what the guy wanted. After all, just participating in the contest itself is a very prestigious and noble endeavor. However, the trickster was not interested in how popular and authoritative the contest was. First of all, he must have some benefit. Suddenly the shameless man declared that he would definitely win the contest. And then the girl must become his wife. The bird was caught in a snare. The girl blushed and lost all words. Du-Ying thought the guy was an inexperienced snot. After all, he's not even in college yet, so he should marry her younger sister. The unceremonious trickster said that the girl's beauty would eventually begin to fade, and she would soon greatly regret not marrying a smart, handsome, and promising guy. The smug braggart continued to sneer with relish. He declared that the little Lola was very lucky. After all, she would have a wonderful husband. This is the second time in a day that the evil mocker has bullied Dao-Ying. I'm getting impatient. In this area, seismologists have recorded powerful tremors of unknown origin. Scientists are still unable to explain the reason for their occurrence. Only his quick feet could save the poor wolf now. It was indeed a very cordial welcome for a dear guest. The relatives couldn't understand the reason for Du-Ying's anger. Why was she so angry at the discouraged young wolf? Little Lol assumed that the big bad wolf kissed her sister, and now a little wolf cub might be born. It is hard for adults to understand the fairy tale world of a little Loli. Life experience and knowledge often prevent us from plunging into the world of fantasy, and at least for a moment to be a tiny carefree child. You meet people by their clothes and see them off by their wits. Therefore, you should be smart and dress nicely, so that you can meet and greet well. Today was a very important event. Dao-Ying had made all the preparations she could. The new outfit was very much to the lover's liking. He couldn't take his eyes off the seductress. There's no hurry. You should walk quietly behind and scrutinize all the scenic spots. The shrewd girl immediately realized what the wife-beater was so passionate about. She was ready to claw his shameless eyes out like a panther. The girl asked the boy to walk beside her. However, he objected. He wanted to stay in the rearguard. Yang Ning's disobedient. Yang Ning was driving her crazy. She was annoyed that this insolent man was always sassing and insulting her. Why was the girl so indignant? Yang Ning was behaving calmly and decently, quietly admiring the gifts of nature. The voluptuous man decided not to test his fate any further. He walked obediently by my side. Everyone here seemed to know and deeply respect Dao-Ying. She was greeted with a very friendly welcome. However, no one paid any attention to Yang Ning. It was as if he was an invisible ghost. These people are all very serious. They were tirelessly scrutinizing various things. It seems that people here know Dao-Ying very well. Everyone is happy to see her. No doubt the girl is too popular in this kind of society. This young guy ran up to the girl in no time. He said his name was Zhou Shuiben. He had once had the honor of talking to Dao-Ying. The chatty guy said he used to have dinner with a girl at a seafood restaurant. But I don't think Du-Ying could remember who she was talking to now. The impudent upstart was clearly unhappy at not being recognized. so he turned his attention to Yang Ning, who he thought was the girl's friend. The chatterer did not stop talking. Suddenly he said that Yang Ning couldn't be Du Ying's friend. It was clearly her bodyguard. Immediately, Yang Ning was called a bully, then a skinny bodyguard. What other compliments would he hear from a stupid mouthpiece? The annoying redneck was confused. He still couldn't figure out who Yang Ning was. Suddenly, the chatterer thought that the stranger might be quite an important person at this event. It was silly to call him a bully. It seems like Yang Ning's popularity is starting to rise, and some people are getting annoyed. Yang Ning confidently stated that he didn't want to waste his time on empty, silly conversations. He is a very busy man. Also, the cocky Yang Ning added that he was not the one following Du Ying, but she was following him. Therefore, he should be treated with great respect. The silly fool realized he'd made a mistake. Sometimes you have to watch your main enemy, your tongue, carefully. A lot of people would like to have eyes like that. They are more expensive than any antiques and precious metal. After all, such eyes are able to see very important and valuable information. The all-seeing eyes immediately stopped on the blood cloud bat snuffbox. The guy instantly determined that the bottle was created back in the Qing dynasty, about 160 years ago. Its actual value reaches nearly 80,000 yuan. Also, the guy could easily and quickly determine what an item was made of. And, in addition, he could understand how the thing was made. With such knowledge and skills, it is easy to win and be a winner. The boy's good-naturedness and childlike enthusiasm interested the wise old man. He looked fondly at the jubilant Yang Ning. The kind-hearted old man offered to let the boy borrow one of his snuff boxes. He thought Yang Ning was just a child who was excited at the sight of a cheap toy. The boy couldn't understand why the old man was so generous. Such simple-minded people are very rare nowadays. Yang Ning said without hesitation that he was taking the red snuff box. He said that this thing was the most colorful and beautiful. The old man was confused for a moment. He was surprised by the stranger's choice. The girl didn't even think that among the pile of cheap junk, the guy would be able to find a precious item here. She realized that Grandpa Ming had fallen into the trap of a young trickster. The old man had thoroughly studied the age, the material of this item over a long period of time. And now he could not believe that some young man had correctly appraised the item in a matter of seconds. Mr. Meng started urging me to get another snuff box. The red one was too dirty. Lukovitz asked why the old man did not want to give the red snuff box. After all, a promise must be kept. The young man's insolence made the old man angry. He was no longer happy to be associated with this stubborn man. The trickster said that there is surely a way out of every dead end. A dirty snuff box can always be washed. The stubborn one did not want to let go of his valuable prey. As you know, a word is not a sparrow. If it flies out, you can't catch it. The old man had promised to give him the snuff box, and now he must keep his word. Grandpa was sad. He obviously did not want to say goodbye to the red snuff box, which was actually quite precious to him. The angry girl said that the guy should treat the good-natured old man with respect. You should also thank the grandfather for making the gift. But the mischievous boy unceremoniously grabbed the thing he liked. He thanked his grandfather for the gift. The spoiled child got a toy. Now he was quite happy. The old man was too careless. He didn't expect the young brat to fool him. The girl realized that the thing was indeed valuable. Otherwise, the grandfather wouldn't have been so sad. Robbery in broad daylight. A child is being robbed of a toy. The local racketeering ring is on the prowl. The pretty racketeer immediately wanted the red snuff box. The boy said he wasn't going to give up his thing. Let the fugitive choose some other snuff box on the table. But the cunning bandit wanted this particular item. She claimed she loved the color red. The toady immediately wanted to show off to the mistress. He said that tomorrow he would buy a whole bunch of beautiful snuff boxes for the girl. No one paid any attention to the empty-headed sycophant. The bandit demanded the red snuff box. She was not interested in other things. It was a shame to say goodbye to the jewel. But the robber was too stubborn. It was impossible to refuse her. The guy carelessly handed over the snuff box, said it was a friendly gift from him. He pretended he wasn't interested at all. The extortionist could not restrain her appetite. Now she demanded that the boy tell her the true history of the red snuff box and what it was made of. The guy quickly threw out a bunch of miscellaneous detailed information about the mysterious item. In particular, he said that the snuff box was made of red coral and covered with rare patterns. In addition, the item was carved with a tamed beast with an ivory pearl in its mouth. The material from which the snuff box is made is very rare. Yes, and such a technique of manufacturing is now forgotten. The item was created more than 160 years ago. The other masters could not believe that the snuffbox could be so valuable. After all, the wise and clever old man Meng Lao would never have kept such a precious item among cheap commonplace objects. The high-minded appraiser was extremely surprised at the young man's abilities. How can you accurately describe an object at a glance? It is incomprehensible. All the craftsmen were dumbfounded with astonishment. Could it be that some young man was more experienced and more intelligent than they were? The careless troublemaker continued his mischief. He said that he didn't even bother to use his brain when he gave the assessment. And with that, he probably humiliated the experienced professionals even more. Young Redditor immediately said that Yang Ning is a great liar. After all, one must study for many years in order to correctly, accurately evaluate antiques. In addition, the wise Meng Lao would not keep a precious item among a pile of pacifiers in a public place. The arrogant flatterer tried to shower the experienced appraiser with compliments. He assured me that he had never doubted Meng Lao's authority and knowledge. The wise master just wanted to have a little fun. So he put the precious snuffbox on display among the pile of garbage. He did not suspect that one of his colleagues would be able to see the real price and value of the thing. At last, the sullen old man confessed that the snuffbox was very ancient and costly. He also claimed that the young man had told the true history of the object. The craftsman wondered why the super-valuable snuffbox was in such an unsightly place. Was the old man out of his mind? It's too late to explain anything now. The honorable old man has been cornered. The girl felt sorry for the clever grandfather. She respected him very much. The young trickster said that such things should be kept in a safe place. After all, they are great prey for thieves. Meng Lao replied that he never thought that inexperienced, yellow-haired youths would be able to spot a precious item. His words sounded like praise and not in the least bit like an insult. The cunning fox seized the favorable opportunity. She asked Meng Lao to make Yang Ning enter the appraiser competition. There were several appraisal departments, including the art and calligraphy department, the porcelain department, the traditional paintings department, the ancient books and rare texts department, and the old coins and jewelry department. These departments were quite interesting. Tomorrow, Yang Ning has to go through the tests formed by the aforementioned departments. After successfully completing the task, he will be able to become a contestant. The dejected boy was terribly reluctant to take the tests. It reminded him of school, which he didn't like very much. But the guy still wanted to be a contestant, so he figured he'd let them mess with him once and take the stupid tests. Yang Ning resented that he never has the right to choose. No one listens to his opinion. The young envious man decided that he would not allow Yang Ning to participate in the competition. To do this, he will even use all his family connections. For example, he will ask for help from his dad, who works in the jewelry department of Zhou Bokong. Yang Ning made a firm promise to become a contestant. Now he must keep his word. There are no ways to retreat, only to move forward. Friends, acquaintances sometimes suddenly burst into our lives and ruin all our plans, distract us from important work. Something like that happened this time. Suddenly the path was blocked by an arrogant guy. He seemed to have known Daoin for a long time. The girl spoke rather surly to her old acquaintance. She felt that talking to him was worse than a bitter radish. The arrogant brat said that his name was Zheng Yu Kang. He also arrogantly emphasized that he was known and respected by everyone here. The swaggering dandy asked to be called King Zhao in a very simple and modest manner. This smug narcissist couldn't seem to put a price on himself. Insolence is the second happiness, but not everyone is able to tolerate insolent people and treat them ceremoniously for a long time. Yang Ning asked who the bastard was standing in their way. The girl pretended that she didn't know this person at all. This cold-blooded behavior infuriated the arrogant, self-proclaimed king. Yang Ning asked the arrogant king to clear the way and leave them in peace. After all, they still had a lot of important matters to settle. Suddenly, the haughty king turned into a pathetic, shabby dog. He ran after the girl, wagging his tail, and insisted that she go with him to an expensive restaurant where he was to have a meeting with two important beauties. The girl knew that he was a very stubborn man. He must be talked to. Otherwise, he would continue to pursue them relentlessly. The nonchalant girl agreed to go to the restaurant, but on one condition. Yang Ning must also be with them. The pompous king was upset that they would be accompanied by an ignorant ragamuffin. It was not a royal thing to be in the company of such despicable people. The girl reminded him that the swaggering dandy had invited two of his friends, so she had the right to come with her friend. The dandy gave in and agreed to let Yang Ning go to the restaurant with them. He thought of this guy as a harmless, naive child who could be bullied when he had the chance. The restaurant was expensive, and only rich people could get in. It was these two rarefied beauties that Zheng Yukang invited to the restaurant. They had just recently arrived in China. An unwary glutton tried to eat all the dishes at once. The free food seemed especially delicious. Free food is good with vinegar. The pompous beauties were outraged by the young savage's behavior. How dare he behave so vulgarly in their presence? The dressed-up coquettes seemed to be naively polite. Du Ying immediately felt uncomfortable with them. The girls immediately started throwing around cheap compliments. They thought Du Ying was a very fashionable and stylish girl. Her short bangs are very popular now. The self-proclaimed token girl said that dark color is quite popular this season. She also said that she is always ready to help Da In choose some exclusive model. The girl politely declined the bear's favor. Fashion did not interest her at all. The flirtatious lady scrutinized her interlocutor. And then, like a dog, she started sniffing. Silly girl was thrilled that Do-in was using Shannel perfume. She assured that this company would release a new model in the fall. It would be a continuation of the delightful romantic line. Do-in was annoyed by the useless chatter of the two coquettes. She was on pins and needles. She wanted to leave the restaurant quickly, but Vasca listened and ate. The glutton relentlessly devoured, like a boa constrictor, everything that was brought to him. Free food whetted his appetite. The girl even envied the guy. At least he was doing something useful, filling his stomach, replenishing his energy, and she had to listen to empty, uninteresting chatter. The guy's excessive appetite attracted the attention of many visitors. The girl wanted Yang Ning to behave himself at the table. Do Ying's pinching was very painful. It felt like a huge crab was clawing at her thigh. The glutton was offended that his meal had been interrupted. The wolf's appetite had just been whetted. Suddenly the guy decided to go powder his nose. He unapologetically, unceremoniously got up from the table. Finally, there's a place to get rid of the extra fun, and give your stomach time to rest. A nice secluded place where men can sometimes discuss important issues, and also to clarify their relationships. It seems that the young man was clearly following Yang Ning. Even in a place like this he was following him. Liar said that he had long planned to visit this restaurant. Therefore, his presence here is not accidental, but it's not good to lie. You can be punished for it. A satisfied Yang Ning decided to tarnish the reputation of the young brat, and it seems to have hit the target. The hypocritical redneck was burning with anger. Now his main goal in life was to take revenge on Yang Ning. The atmosphere in the restaurant was too boring. Empty conversations were tiring. Yang Ning decided to have some fun. He told the girl that he met King Zhao in the toilet with wet pants. He must have been too surprised by Yang Ning's manhood, and so his bladder failed its master at the wrong moment. The girl laughed uncontrollably. She was glad for a moment to get away from the boring conversations of silly fashionistas. But the young barbarian's behavior seemed to irritate the empty-headed coquettes. They grimaced in displeasure. The arrogant King Zhou realized that he was being humiliated in front of the public, and he hated Yang Ning completely. The girls sitting across the table were very angry at this action of the protagonist. One of them asked if he really said it, because it was disgusting and very vulgar. Yang Ning asked what they even knew about the vulgarity of dislike. One of the girls told him to look at himself, because Yang Ning probably didn't get a good education, and his behavior shows it. At the same time, another girl said that he wore clothes from a thrift store, and asked if it was his sense of taste. He said only little girls wear makeup, and he doesn't want to talk to people who act superior all the time. The girls got angry at such a response from the protagonist, and asked what he wanted to say. One of the girls turned to Zheng Xiao and complained that this guy was humiliating them, and he should stand up for them. Zheng Xiao asked if he had really insulted his girlfriends and told him to apologize as soon as possible before he went too far. Smoking a cigarette, he asked if the girls really thought the new Dior line would be based on the word nostalgia. The man also said that in his opinion it would not happen. The girls looked at each other and wondered how he knew about it, and was he really eavesdropping on them. Yang Ning took a cigarette out of his mouth and said, "The girls also mentioned that next season can have short bangs." As he said that some of the stars they mentioned have foreheads like eggplant and no short bangs will beautify them. At the same time, Ling Xuan only laughed, unable to gush with emotion. The girls were extremely frightened and asked the question, who is he that knows all about this, and is he really speaking from his own deduction? He said the girls had also mentioned that Shannel would be releasing a new line of perfume. However, he said that it is unlikely to be a continuation of the romantic line. He said that the romantic line is a line created for the centenary of the company, and everyone knows about it. Suddenly, the girls stood up from the table and turned to Zheng Xiao, saying that they had just remembered that they had urgent business to attend to, and thanked him for inviting them. While Zheng Xiao himself stood there full of rage, He only said that all their speculations had been exposed by a vulgar boy and a middle schooler, which made Ling Xuan laugh. Ling Xuan said that it was an interesting show and said that they could go out since the show was already over. He stretched and agreed with that. Quite soon, the company walked away from the scene. Zhengxiao watched their backs. Zhengxiao turned to the man still looking at the main character's back. The guy said to find out more about him if I could get rid of him. They were riding in a pink car and talking. Ling Xuan asked the protagonist where he learned everything. The girl explained that he knows a lot about fashion, clothes, and everything else, and she was just curious. He said it wasn't him who said it. It was her. Immediately afterward, Yanning said with a mocking expression that he would not answer. The girl only remained silent at such an answer, and wondered if he was really a genius or just well-rounded. The girl said he was really lucky, and they looked out the window again. Tang Tang lay quietly on the sofa and sniffed contentedly. Lin Zhiqing sat on the sofa in a slump, watching TV. Suddenly, Lin Zhiqing heard the sound of the doors opening. It turned out to be Yang Ning and Ling Xuan returning home. Seeing the girl, the protagonist only blushed while Lin Zhiqing herself said that it was nice that they had come back together. However, he thought that there was absolutely no point if she wouldn't even let him touch her. Yang Ning also thought that he should tease someone else. At the same time, Ling Xuan held out that very coral snuffbox to the protagonist. He didn't expect such generosity from the girl, and asked if she was really giving him the snuffbox. Lin Xuan said that it originally belonged to the main character, and he was the one who should take it. He didn't expect this, and was very happy. He thought that Yang Ning would never see her again, and that he could not believe that the snuffbox was with him again. But at the same time, Lin Zhiqing got up from the sofa and asked what was the matter. Lin Xuan said that it was a snuffbox with an estimated value of about 200,000 yuan, and Grandpa was very upset. Lin Zhiqing was extremely surprised at such a huge price and almost shouted. She touched Lin Xuan's elbow and asked if she really thought she didn't like him, since she was literally giving him a gift of 200,000 yuan, and they were very nice. Ling Xuan said that it wasn't like that at all. The girl asked to be allowed to tell what he had done this morning. It wasn't long before the girl finished her story. Lin Zhiqing opened her mouth wide in surprise and asked if this was really possible since she was probably joking. Lin Zhiqing didn't expect the fact that he could know so much. Immediately afterward, the girl grabbed the protagonist and forcefully took him to her room. Yan Ning was extremely surprised by the abrupt movement from Lin Zhiqing and wondered why she was so anxious to bring the protagonist there. It wasn't long before he and the girl were at the entrance to the room. The girl instantly sat down on her couch and asked what he was staring at, and told him to come over. At the same time, Yang Ning thought that this was bullshit, and he should say goodbye to his virginity. After Lin Zhiqing brought the protagonist to his room, the guy flushed and said that he had never had this before. Scratching the back of his head, the unexpected girl took off her pendant and said she needed the protagonist's help identifying the item. Immediately afterward, the girl extended the value to the protagonist. The main character seemed petrified, and the sound of the main character's heartbreaking could be heard. The man began to envy the sacred Buddha and talked about switching places with the protagonist. The system gave out a description of a white jade Buddha. He sighed as he looked at the jewel and said, "This jade Buddha is good." The girl said it wasn't the only thing she had and held out the box to the protagonist. She asked to see her collection. There were many precious items such as Nanyang's pearl necklace, a red tourmaline ring, and a pendant made of southern agate. Lin Zhiqing turned to the protagonist and asked if they could be sold dearly. The man, still confused as to why the girl needed it, said, yes, it was possible. Yang Ning decided to address Lin Zhiqing directly and said, "Where did the girl get so many different pieces of jewelry since they were all gorgeous?" The girl closed her eyes and said they were received, not scammed, if that was what he was asking. While he was looking at the jewelry, Lin Zhiqing asked how much the protagonist thought it was worth. He said that she could probably sell everything expensively for somewhere around 700,000 yuan. He asked what her question meant, because the sooner she starts, the sooner she will sell, because the jewelry market is quite fickle. Lin Zhiqing excitedly asked the protagonist if she had succeeded. He bluntly asked the girl if she needed money because she seemed desperate. The girl said that she needed 8 million yuan, and even though Lin Xuan lent her the money, she still needed 3 million yuan and wondered what to do. Yang Ning thought about it, and wondered what if he sold it all in the system, because he would be able to get about 3,600,000 yuan. And he also has 900,000 on his bank card, and just as much as he needs. In addition, he will also get points. He turned to the girl and asked her what she thought about him selling the jewelry, since he had people willing to buy it. The girl seriously considered the main character's proposal. After that, she placed her hand on the protagonist's arm and thanked him. After a while, he would dry his hair with a blow dryer. In the middle of this process, he received a new message on his phone. It told him to check his email. As he picked up his phone, he realized that his bank card balance had increased to 1,800,000 yuan. The man also realized that he needed to transfer the money to Ms. Fire, and then looked at the glasses. Immediately afterward, the protagonist received a message about the achievement. He lay on the bed and thought about the number of points he had gotten. The man wondered how he could use them. Right after that, he clicked on the beauty item store and thought that he should thank the girls for helping him complete the task. It wasn't long before he came across an item called beauty pills and realized that it was exactly what he needed. At the same time, the girls were sitting on couches in the living room. Yanning walked down the stairs and realized that all the beauties were just there. Lin Jiqing thanked the protagonist and asked how he managed to sell everything so quickly, and if he wanted to introduce the girls to the buyers. Ling Xuan said that the girl made a lot of money. The protagonist smiled nervously and said that he would probably introduce them next time, and thanked her for trusting the girl. Lin Jiqing said that he was very cool. At the same time, Ling Xuan said that these items could have been sold more expensively, while Tang Tang told the protagonist to compensate and treat them to dinner. He said that Lin Jiqing urgently needed money and had a small gift to compensate. Immediately afterward, he held out the beauty pills to the girls. The main character said that these are beauty pills, and they are derived from various Chinese herbal remedies. The man also told them not to look at the fact that there is no official brand name, but there are no side effects and he can guarantee the quality. Jiqing thanked her for the gift, but said that she already had something similar. Right after that, the girl looked at her friends and was greatly surprised. The girls looked at the preparations with burning eyes. The girl wondered why they were looking at them like that. Lin wondered if it was because of yesterday and if they were jealous. Lin Jiqing turned to the girl and asked if they were really effective. Tang Tang said she didn't know because she had never tried them. Right after that, Lin Jiqing asked why Tang Tang was looking at them like a cat looking at catnip since it wasn't too indecent. Tang Tang shuddered at this comparison and said that it was Lin Jiqing who was the cat here. Ling Xuan said that they had seen him fight and his physical abilities. The girl also said that when they first met he was not, and after 3 days he had turned into a completely new person. Jiqing said it's all too implausible, and is he really an alien? Yang Ning covered in sweat and said that these pills were normal, and he didn't know what she was talking about. All 3 girls looked at the protagonist suspiciously and asked if he really meant it. Still covered in sweat, he turned away from the girls and thought it was a close call. He realized that he was very lucky that as soon as it came to cosmetics, the girls' IQs dropped to 0. He handed the pills to the girls and told them to take 2 pills 3 times a day, and the bad stuff would be gone from their bodies. He told me to worry because they don't have any side effects. The man also said not to chew them, just swallow them. Lin Xuan had been holding the pills the whole time, and the other 2 girls felt as if they were hanging on to her. Lin Jiqing said that the girl was still very young and didn't need them when Lin Jiqing herself needed them badly. He just exhaled and realized that when it came to cosmetics, women could really go crazy. At the same time, someone slapped the girl's cheek with great force. The man was moving away from the girl who was lying on the floor. He said he was warning her for the last time, and next time she shouldn't blame him for what would happen. The girl pressed down instead of hitting and asked if it was because of her, and why everyone prefers Ms. Lin they her. At the same time, the man was moving farther away from the girl, who was lying on the floor crying, shivering with her whole body. The girl said that she would not forgive this, and would take revenge on Ling Xuan, even if it was the last thing she did. After a while, morning came. He lay quietly on his bed with nothing on his mind. Suddenly, the protagonist heard a piercing scream and instantly woke up. He immediately ran out into the living room and asked what was wrong. As it turned out, the girls admired each other's appearance. Ling Xuan told Lin Jiqing that her skin had become smoother and brighter. At the same time, Lin Jiqing said that her skin had become smoother and brighter too. The girls clearly didn't expect the pills to really work. At the same time, he only exhaled disappointedly. The man said that the girls scared him very much, and he thought that robbers or thieves had come to the house. At the same time, the girls only paid attention to the main character, who was walking around completely naked. Immediately afterward, the girls threw a pillow at him and called him a pervert. Yanning was greatly embarrassed and said that he had just woken up and heard the screams, which was completely normal for a man like him. Lin Jiqing couldn't stop looking at the protagonist and said that the girl was very impressed. At the same time, Lin Xuan only covered her face with her hands to avoid seeing the protagonist and told him to put on some pants right now. He turned back around and started complaining as if the girls had never seen a man's manhood, and Yang Ning would go back to his room to put on his pants. Quite soon, the company sat down to breakfast. He and Lin Jiqing were talking. The girl asked if she had gotten prettier, but what he said was that she was very pretty and the most beautiful. At the same time, Ling Xuan only wondered where Tang Tang was and if she was still sleeping. The girl thought that she should wake her up. Suddenly, someone called the girl's cell phone. Ling Xuan picked up the phone and was very surprised at what she heard. Suddenly, the girl cried. She was shaking all over and could not utter a word. Lin Jiqing anxiously turned to the girl and asked why she was crying. Ling Xuan moved closer to her sister and said that Fubu was dead, crying even more. Immediately after that, the girl hung on to Lin Jiqing, unable to stay on her feet. Lin Jiqing told her not to hold back and cry all her tears. The girl gently placed her hands on Ling Xuan's shoulders and asked, "How did he die?" Ling Xuan turned her head and said that he jumped off the balcony from the 7th floor. Unable to stop the tears, Cutie said that Uncle Lu's people found out that his son owed millions of dollars, and Fubu couldn't pay them back. Recently, he was given a huge sum of money, and the girl thinks it's connected to her recent kidnapping attempt. Lin Jiqing finally understood the circumstances of the event, and told the girl not to blame himself because he wanted to help his family, and it was a desperate move. The girl squeezed her friend's hands tightly. Ling Xuan asked why he didn't turn to her if he had money problems, and why he wanted to grab her. The girl didn't understand anything. The protagonist thought hard. The man realized that he had no idea who this Fubu and he was angry for making the girl so sad. Yang Ning thought that if he really didn't want to hurt Ling Xuan, then why did he act on a plan involving hurting her? He realized that something was wrong here. Lin Jiqing said that she couldn't let Tang Tang know about it. Immediately after that, Ling Xuan told her friend not to worry, because she knew what to do. Immediately afterward, the girl got up from the table and trying to throw off her breasts, said that they had to get ready for today's assessment. At the same time, there was a meeting going on in the assessment room. Some did not believe that a child who had just reached adulthood would have assessment abilities. Another man said to underestimate today's youth because they will be able to surprise them. At the same time, another man said that this child has no education at all, and shouldn't young people follow the old generation and learn from them. At the same time, another man said with a pleasant smile whether they were not too old to stay here because none of them had good people to realize. The man was convinced that they needed new perspectives. Nevertheless, not everyone agreed with this thought, and only looked at the man in silence. Some even wondered why anyone was even talking about it. He wasn't that much older than them. Another man approached Old Man Ming because he had heard that a boy had found a rare antique on his desk. The man asked if he had really put it there to check, or if he had become senile from old age. At the same time, the old man was only angered by such a sarcastic comment from his colleague. With an abrupt movement, the man placed the cup of tea on the table. At the same time, Ling Xuan and him were heading down the corridor to the meeting place. Ling Xuan said that the industry elders were here and asked the protagonist to behave in front of them. He only nodded at all the girls' remarks. Suddenly, the company heard a sharp shout from the direction of the hall. Most likely it was Old Man Meng who was angrily addressing his colleague and shouting at him to explain what he wanted to say. As the verbal altercation continued, the girl's face became more and more nervous as Yang Ning burst into laughter. The old man clearly couldn't contain his emotions and slammed his hands on the table and started calling his colleague names. Suddenly a third person intervened and stopped the argument between the men. The man sat down at the table and told everyone to sit down and discuss things like educated people. At the same time, he and Ling Xuan found themselves at the entrance. The girl tapped the protagonist on the shoulder and told him to introduce himself. The boy smiled and said hello. He gave his name and said he turned 18 this year. He said he went to a 3rd district high school and now he wanted to go to college. He said his goal was to pass the test so the Lin family could enter the evaluation contest. Yang Ning said that he was self-taught, so his methods were not exactly like the others. At the same time, Old Man Meng only nodded in response to the main character's words. One of the elders expressed his excitement because they might have problems with mutual understanding and asked his colleagues for their opinion. One of the elders said that he was willing to give the young man a chance because he looked promising. Another said that they need only the best of the best because only then can they stand up to adversity. Said that they should let the young man try himself because only then and not find out his true abilities. At the same time, one of the elders turned out to be Zhou Xueben's father. He remembered his son begging him not to let the guy participate. The man realized that he didn't care who participated, but he couldn't let this guy test him. In the end, Elder Meng said he was in favor and they should try it out. Immediately afterward, a man, apparently in charge, pulled out a small box. He turned to the protagonist, pulling a scroll out of a box and asked to see it. He was very surprised to see such an incredibly valuable item on the table. The system said it was calligraphy by Luo Wei Ying. The system rated it as modern calligraphy by the chairman of Chinese calligraphy. The main character's eyes seemed to light up. He said that the chairman's style was incredibly good, and he had a good idea of plum. At the same time, the elder was extremely surprised because he didn't even give a hint of origin, and he recognized the calligraphy at a glance. The man asked the protagonist if they knew the chairman, and he would like to know a little more about the connection. He only scratched his cheek and said sin not knowing his work. However, the other elders were not so gullible and thought that he had merely guessed. Yan Ning squinted his eyes and asked to let this child tell more about the chairman. He said that the chairman always insisted on studying the art of painting. The protagonist said that by using Chinese traditional art as a model, the chairman created a style that incorporates the purpose of ancient Chinese life struggle. All the elders listened attentively to the protagonist. He said that according to the chairman, the true essence of art lies in its ability to innovate, and innovation is not a popular method in most art forms. Lin Xuan looked at the protagonist and only smiled. He continued that it is especially relevant today, when post-art modernism must strive for the right image, but also conform to the changes of modern society. Guy said the man has created his own style of painting with his own laws and thoughts that provoke the imagination. And this is how a generation is created in artists who will challenge themselves. After such an incredible story, the whole hall only listened attentively to the main character. After finishing the story, the elder said that he had done very well for himself. One of the elders said that it was indeed true that young people continue to follow the example of the Chinese people since the old dynasties. All the elders agreed with his colleague's statement. One elder started clapping for the protagonist and said that they could no longer doubt him and that he deserved to participate in the competition. The protagonist smiled and looked at Ling Xuan. Still smiling, the girl nodded to the protagonist. Suddenly, one of the elders turned to the protagonist and said that he was rooting for him even before all of this. And when rumors about the guy came out, it interested him even more. However, the main character's eyes instantly lit up as soon as Yang Ning saw this book. The system rated this item as the 12th Ling Shu volume. The system also said that this collection was written by the famous scholar Zhang Shu, and this is the last of 4 copies. Seeing such a valuable thing in front of him, he turned to the elder and asked if he wanted to negotiate with the protagonist. Immediately after that, he said to sell Tom to him. The elder was instantly surprised by such insolence on the part of the protagonist. At the same time, Ling Xuan even did not expect such behavior from the protagonist and opened her mouth wide. Elder Zhao, he wasn't the only one who said as quickly as possible that Tom wasn't for sale. Ling Xuan thought to herself that this was the expression on the protagonist's face when he found the ring, and the girl hadn't seen him so excited since then. Elder Meng hesitated, for young Ning could immediately recognize the value of the snuffbox from the many that the man had placed on the table. The man was convinced that he was a good actor, and now he felt that it was in a 12-volume book. However, Elder Zhao said with a smile that he was not going to sell this book. The other elders began to say that he was overconfident, and if such a person were to represent the company in the competition, he would definitely bring shame upon the company. One of the elders said that the person who gave him the books said that they were passed down from a famous sect and contained engravings and the value of all these books from 500,000 yuan. At the same time, the girl only looked warily at the protagonist. She squinted her eyes and asked what he had discovered. The protagonist's face covered with photos, and he began to excuse himself more. The man said that this book was one of Ling Shu's 12 volumes. However, the girl did not believe the protagonist, and asked if the books were worth less than they should, because they could lose their reputation and trust if they were wrong. At the same time, Elder Zhao said that even if it is a simple book that is in good condition, it is also valuable. The girl turned to the man and said to underestimate the protagonist, because he doesn't know him at all. The girl said that even a $1 million ring can be easily identified with his help. However, the entire hall fell silent upon hearing such a statement from Ling Xuan. The girl said he would surely prove it. At the same time, the protagonist only scratched his nose and asked what the girl was saying, because he didn't understand anything. Realizing that she was being bullied, the girl shouted at the protagonist. Ling Xuan asked what he wanted. He raised his hand and said that for 500,000 yuan, he would tell everything. The entire audience was shocked by the words of the protagonist. Ling Xuan wondered why the protagonist had put up such a high price, and whether there was something in these books that they were hiding. The girl crossed her arms and agreed to that price. He only smiled and said payment comes first. At the same time, Elder Zhao turned to the protagonist and said that it was too bold a statement, and he didn't think his evaluation was worth that much. Yang Ning turned to the man and asked how expensive he thought this book was. The man scratched his chin and said that most likely each book was worth 100,000 yuan. The protagonist said that he would buy all the books for 800,000 yuan and asked me to tell him the account so he could transfer the amount right now. The entire cast of elders or with silently looked at each other, not understanding what was going on. The protagonist asked in surprise if something was wrong and said to call the clerk or secretary because he was going to buy books. However, Ling Xuan squinted her eyes and said that she would buy all the books for 1,000,000 yuan. The guy asked if the girl really wasn't kidding. However, he was instantly upset because he didn't expect the girl to do that. Ling Xuan thought that the 12 volumes of ancient books were worth about 1,000,000 yuan, and even if he charged 500,000 for the appraisal, they wouldn't lose money. Ling Xuan said that she would pay, and now he had to tell everything. The protagonist exhaled and dejectedly agreed. Immediately afterward, he coughed to clear and began to narrate. Yang Ning said that the 12th volume was created by the Chenghua family author, and in fact the 12th volume is actually the hidden 13th volume. Elder Zhao said that it was really true because it was often printed in the printing house, and these books were in the collection of many people. He said that right now he was talking about the edited version by the famous medic Shengzong. He said that he was an expert on ancient books and had the elder never heard his name once. However, the man didn't understand what this had to do with the book, and asked if it had anything to do with the Zhongmen clan, as it was rumored that each member of the family was involved in a different area. Yang Ning said he also knows that some families glue the page together and hide their books, and a non-professional wouldn't be able to see it. Repeating us interrogated the protagonist, does the protagonist really think that people hide it in plain sight? The protagonist picked up a book and said that the Zhongmen clan used to have many printing presses, so they hid their knowledge in books. The elder huffed because if these books are really from the Zhongmen clan, the tone is committing a great sin. The other elders were sweating and questioned if everything he said was true, and there was a treasure hidden in the books. He asked if they didn't believe him and asked for water. However, Elder Zhao instantly asked if he really wanted to destroy the book by exposing its story. However, he only covered his ears at the old man's shouting and said that he didn't care, and should just pay. Right after he finished his story, Lin Xuan asked, "What is the current price now?" With excitement on her face, Elder said that after the reassessment, they will start with a starting price of 4 million. Immediately afterward, the whole room was dumbfounded by such news. Ling Xuan was also completely shocked. In the beginning, there was a ring, then a snuffbox, and now Yang Ning joined Lin's house. The girl asked the protagonist if he wanted to work in Lin's house because the girl promised to pay him a good salary. He put his hands behind his head and said that there was absolutely no problem, because he also wanted them to get married and become grandparents who would have many granddaughters. Realizing that she was being laughed at, the girl asked the protagonist to be a little more serious. Meanwhile, Elder Meng said that this suggestion is not such a bad thing after all. This man has a head on his shoulders and will take care of his girlfriend. However, Ling Xuan'e turned around and said that she was only asking him to work in the house. However, the man with a serious expression asked how much she was willing to pay the protagonist. 1,000,000? 1,000,000,000? The girl instantly realized what she was asking for, and their potential loss. The man said that the first time he met her, he found a ring worth 1,000,000 yuan, and then he identified a snuffbox worth 200,000 yuan. The man asked what was in store for him since his appraisal had increased the value of the 12 volumes tenfold and whether she could support such a person. Raising a cup of tea, the man said that if he wanted to screw them over, he would buy the book for 1,000,000, and then sell it for several times that amount. Ling Xuan instantly realized the full force of the responsibility of her words. The girl realized that she was only the granddaughter of House Lin and would not be able to support him. Immediately after that, Yan Ning smiled radiantly and asked if the girl didn't want him. However, the girl ignored the protagonist and asked her grandfather what secret these 12 volumes were hiding. The elder smiled and said that it was probably Xiong Zongli's manuscript. The man also said that the people of Zhongmen were focused on spiritual aspects, and he could contact old friends from Huangyi. Immediately afterward, the man started putting the book away and said he was voting for the guy. Taking the book for himself, the elder waved his hand and was about to leave. Immediately afterward, Elder Ming turned to his colleagues and asked who were the next ones. Suddenly, one of the elders, being angry, said that it was his turn. Elder. He said that although he hated to admit it, the kid had talent. He thanked the man and asked how he would test the protagonist. Immediately afterward, the man pulled out a bag. The elder smiled and said that he had recently received a painting for appraisal, but was unable to establish the true value and asked the protagonist to help with that. The main character was surprised because he immediately thought about what kind of cloth the picture was painted on and with what colors. It wasn't long before the man unpacked the painting and showed it to the protagonist. The system judged it to be modern art. It showed 6 girls in a poorly lit room. Yang Ning blushed slightly, but without stopping smiling said that the painting gives him an impression that makes him see naked girls in the dark. He said that this painting is dark like a gray world, and the more you look into it, you notice the distortion of the image. He said that most likely the guy who painted this painting is what you are avoiding. Immediately afterward, he speculated if this guy was Li Sen. The elder said that it was indeed Li Seng Yi who called the protagonist a man of culture. Right after that, he put his hand on the main character's shoulder and said he was casting his vote for him. Another elder sipping tea said not to even be asked, because Yang Ning is in favor. After that, she asked if anyone else was there. Zhou Xueben's father was covered in profuse sweat. He realized that even though I didn't want him to pass the exam, but his knowledge was too vast. However, the man realized that he could not afford to insult him and had to do something about it. Suddenly, the man received a phone call from someone. Zhou Xueben's father picked up the phone and walked out of the hall. The man's eyes lit up from the information he received and realized that he was counting on Zhao Jiayu a lot right now and he didn't need to worry. Turning to the protagonist, the man said that he would have to rely only on himself and told him to get ready. The man also said that his luck would soon leave him, for the man was sure that he did not know everything. At the same time, old man Ming did not appreciate his colleague's words and asked if he really wanted to be beaten again, because it was obvious that the boy did not rely on luck alone. However, the man would not even listen to the words of his kneeler and told him to shut up. Immediately after that, he started threatening him. These words made Elder Meng extremely angry, so he almost spilled the tea kettle. Looking each other in the eye, the colleagues continued their verbal altercation. At the same time, another elder tried to stop them and told them they were still only in the middle of the test. At the same time, Zhou Xueben's father said that his task was very easy, and it was just an ordinary jade carving. All present were stunned at such news. He asked me what kind of thread he was talking about. The elder began to explain. The man said that it was a carving used to cut stones that might contain jade or emerald. The elder approached the protagonist and said that half of it depended on luck, and the rest on thinking. The man also said that most of the people here had been trained to do that. Zhou Xueben's father leaned in front of the stones and said that his tasks were very simple, because the protagonist needed to choose 3 stones, and if one of them contained jade, he would earn his vote. The man smiled and said that all these stones were from his personal collection, and if he wanted them cut, he had to pay. Elder Meng was extremely offended by the man's demand, as he understood that it was a job, and he could have just taken those stones out of the way. However, he smiled and asked if he could choose more than 3 pieces. The elder was extremely surprised by his question, for he thought the boy would refuse. He leaned over and said he wanted to try cutting more rocks, and could he buy some more? Elder Meng warned the protagonist not to buy any of his things because it was probably all set up by his friends. At the same time, Zhou Xueben's father told me to listen to him because the stones were real. He smiled and realized that his eyes of truth could determine which stone was valuable. He had nothing to worry about. Yan Ning realized with his vision that there are 3 green-colored stones and 2 white-colored stones. On top of that, the latter stones emit some energy, and he thinks it's best to choose them. He pointed to the stones and asked how much they were worth. The elder said they were worth 1,000,000 yuan, and he said that for that kind of money, he could buy a good car, and whether Yang Ning really charges a fair price. The man became agitated and said he would give a discount, 700,000 yuan. She, like him, was adamant and demanded 500,000. The elder began to sense some sort of catch, but agreed anyway. It wasn't long before he wrote a document confirming the purchase. Holding out a pen and documents to the protagonist, the man told him to sign. At the same time, Elder Meng was still trying to persuade the protagonist not to do this. The man said he was playing with rocks, and those rocks were empty. He said he had nothing to worry about because it was only 500,000 yuan, and he would probably make money from it. At the same time, Ling Xuan only gloomily looked at the protagonist. He asked if she would agree with his statement. The girl said she would borrow the stones, to which the elder agreed. It wasn't long before he signed the document. The man rolled the document up in a tube and said he would have voted anyway if it hadn't passed him by. The man stated that she was leaving the company. Ling Xuan perplexedly asked what the man meant. Suddenly, he heard a voice that was unfamiliar to him. The girl was saying that since the elder had made such a decision, they had no right to detain the protagonist any longer. Lin Zong expressed her hopes that the main character's performance would be good. Yan Ning, upon seeing such a beauty, instantly blushed. The elder turned to the lady and said that he rarely sees her. Lin Zong was surprised by such a statement and asked if she couldn't just walk over. Right after that, she turned to the main character and asked if Yang Ning was the guy Elder Zhao had mentioned. He said with excitement that it was indeed true. While he was still standing there with his mouth open, Lin Zong asked how things were going with the evaluation of the 6 items. Elder Ming said that only Mr. Qing refused to vote and everyone else had already agreed. Zhou Xueben's father said that since Lin Zong is here, they have a competent assistant to oversee the evaluation process, and he will go since he has to send a letter to the general office. However, Lin Zong said that she was busy and told her to give the letter to the secretary before leaving. Repeater got angry, and in his thoughts called the mistress Cunning. Yan Ning raised his hands and said that since he had bought the stones from the elder, he could start cutting them to find out what was inside. The elder said there was no need for him to do that. The protagonist said it was incredibly unfortunate because he was sure there was something valuable inside. He held out the stone to Ling Xuan and said that yes, it could be around 1,000,000 yuan. Ling Xuan asked if he was really sure that there was 1,000,000 yuan in there. He said there's no guarantee, and it's a gamble. The man also said he just had a hunch that the stone was valuable. The girl took the stone in her hands, nodded to the protagonist, and said she believed him. Ling Xuan said that she invited in 2 masters to cut the stone. He said he felt sorry that Mr. Zhao didn't value the stones. However, Zhou Xueben's father, Zhou Xueben, said that he did not believe that he might be lucky to have a protagonist. It was not long before the company found themselves in the cutting room of Lin's house. Yan Ning thought that old man Zhao was worried since he realized that the man was in big trouble. One staff member said they should start cutting from there. Another staff member said that the density is low and they could try his method, but they should pay attention to the length. While the staff was sorting out how they should start cutting the stone, he turned to Lin Xuan and asked who Lin Zong was. Lin Xuan said her name is Lin Zong, and she is her cousin, who is the general manager in the auction house. The girl said that unlike her, she has a real position in the company and rarely appears in public. At the same time, the house staff finally began cutting the stone. The sharp blade made contact with the sheath of stone in an attempt to cut through it. However, it wasn't long before the staff was very surprised by the bright green color. The man turned to the protagonist's company and said they had found something. Lin Zong was very surprised by such a finding as she hadn't expected anything sensible. The company started discussing and realized that it was most likely green jade. After that, someone wondered what kind of jade it was. Ling Xuan didn't expect anything either and asked, "What is the real value of the green jade, and can anyone appraise this material?" One of the staff members at Lin's house asked his coworker to look in a certain direction. The man said to look closely and said there are no scratches, and the color is pure. The man also wondered if it was ice lotus jade. The entire company was incredibly surprised by such a find, and Elder Meng told the protagonist that he was incredibly lucky. The employee said it could be used to make 2 sets of necklaces, and the remainder could be used for small accessories. Lin Zong said that her company is entering the jewelry market with a new brand, and they have financed the project in several cities, so they will open stores soon, and she wants to introduce this jade in their collection. Lin Xuan supported her cousin's idea. Mentally, she looked at the protagonist, who hadn't expected such a piercing stare. While Yang Ning was scratching his nose, Lin Zong ordered to hand over 1,000,000 yuan to the protagonist. Suddenly, he realized that he had finally completed his quest to become a millionaire, for which he had received the title. Yan Ning even clenched his fist in joy. However, the system did not leave him without a task, instantly issuing a new one. The system ordered him to become a multimillionaire. Meanwhile, he asked to check the next stone. However, Elder Zhao couldn't believe that he had lost something so precious and begged the protagonist to stop. Grabbing the protagonist's shoulder, the man said he had changed his mind about selling them, and ordered all the stones to be returned to him. However, he waived the contract and said that if the man wanted the stones back, he had to pay 1,000,000,000 yuan, and did he really agree to that? Lin Zong turned to the elder and told him to stop rampaging, for otherwise she would call the guards to stop it. The man at the same moment began to make excuses and tried to wipe the sweat from his face. Immediately afterward, Elder asked the staff to look at the stones in his box. The man asked Mistress what he should do. Yang Ning said that he still saw free as a fish in the water. However, the elder was relentless and ordered the staff to cut more. The staff still continued to cut stone in the same way. However, it wasn't long before the elder's face emptied with despair. As it turned out, his stones were completely empty. The elder could not accept such a reality and cried out that it was impossible. The staff tried to say something. However, they could interfere with such an important person. At the same time, Lin Zong and Ling Xuan watched the old man's despair. Time after time as the stones were cut, they found themselves empty. The elder was crying at the end and still ordered to continue cutting because he was sure that at least one of them would have jade in it. The man turned to the elder and said he was cutting them up, but they were all empty. Suddenly, the man snatched the rock out of the employee's hands and told him he was doing it wrong and ordered him to get out of here. Yang Ning turned to the elder and asked what he was doing. However, the elder didn't even want to listen to the protagonist and ordered him to stay out of the way. The man turned to Elder Meng and said that he believed he could get at least one jade, and he would absolutely get it. It wasn't long, however, before the stone was sawed away in its entirety. Zhou Xueben's father stood in a stupor because he couldn't believe that such a thing had happened. Suddenly, the man started touching his face in frustration and screaming that he had been tricked, and it was all a setup. At the same time, he went up to the elder and said it was his turn. He turned to the employee and said that here was another stone he had picked out, and he wanted to test his luck. Elder Meng approached the protagonist and rushed the employee, saying that he wanted to see the guy win. Everyone started discussing the guy's sharp mind and said that the god of random was helping him, as it could be seen that the jade was green and it was most likely another green ice jade. Elder Joe began to cry because he couldn't believe his misfortune. The employee approached the protagonist and said that he believed that any stone he would give was valuable. The man also asked where he learned this. However, he changed the subject and said to check another rock. Lin Zong turned to the protagonist and asked if he wanted to sell each stone for 5 million. The elder was stunned at these words, but he couldn't say anything. He gave serious thought to Mistress's suggestion. Yang Ning has calculated that the first stone is worth 3 million, the second 1.5 million, and as far as he knows, this system shows the true price, but the shareholders overestimate it. However, he ignored the offer with a smile and thought he would decline. Guy walked up to the man and told him to check out this rock first. The man realized that this stone can't be cut because of its small hardness, but he thinks he can handle it. After cutting the stone, a bright green color was visible from there. The man, even though he expected the value, got very excited and told the rest of the company that it was another green jade. The man said it was an ice jade, and an emerald-colored one at that, and that it was an incredible piece of luck. Elder Joe jumped in surprise and realized that he had obtained another jade. At the same time, Old Man Meng enjoyed his colleague's despair. Quite soon, Zhou Xueben's father began to slowly fall down with a foaming at the mouth. The man asked God why this was happening to him. Shuddering convulsively, the man said those stones were still his. A company gathered around the man, wondering is the elder dead, while Old Man Meng said to call the medics and leave him alone. Lin Zong approached the protagonist and asked what about the 8 million, and even then, he agreed. But suddenly, Lin Zong asked why he wasn't checking the next stone. Yang Ning said he wasn't sure about this stone, and maybe he would keep it as a memory of that day. Fearfully, they began to say that he was good at what he did, and perhaps it was because he was young that this stone turned out to be bad. Even though the men praised the protagonist, there was an invisible reproach about the imperfection of the protagonist. He was covered in sweat because he realized he was being criticized for that choice. He did agree to cut it, but asked to go to another branch to cut it. He took the stone in his hands and thought that if they cut it right now, they would be terrified of the truth. Ling Xuan disapprovingly looked at the protagonist as if she could see right through him. Ling Xuan asked if he really didn't want to check this stone. He got worried and said should he really check this stone because if he cut it, he would spoil the beauty. Ling Xuan said her intuition that there was something valuable in this stone. He asked if the girl knew anything about these stones. The unexpected girl came close to the protagonist's face and asked if he was up to something again, and if his stone was more amazing than the past ones. Suddenly, someone asked, "Do people I wonder what's inside the stone?" As it turned out, Lin Zong had said to cut it in another section without too many eyes so no one would find out. Yan Ning blushed, however, said that it was a great idea. In his thoughts, he began to laugh, for he will enjoy his youth to the fullest as the two beauties want to cut stone with him. Immediately afterward, all the elders left the hall. Later that day, companies got together again. Lin Zong told the master to start cutting the stone, and the entire company began to wait. Immediately afterward, however, the door to the workshop opened. The elder asked if the young people thought they could deceive the old men. Elder Meng said they concluded that with a probability of 80% he would want to cut this stone later. The elder turned to the protagonist, hoping that he wouldn't mind their presence. Yang Ning only scratched the back of his head and asked if he was joking. However, the elder said that he asked seriously and did not appear to be laughing. At the same time, his colleague told the man to stop joking and for the master to start cutting the stone. Immediately afterward, the man inserted the stone into special equipment. It wasn't long before the cutter began to cut away the stone. Absolutely all the elders became excited and opened their mouths. However, the master said that it is green jade, and its quality is below average. The men also said that the color is a little dark, and the man doesn't think it is worth much. However, the protagonist asked him to cut it from the other side. After all, the protagonist has a good feeling about this stone. Lin Xuan and Lin Zong looked at each other, He silently pondered over the main character's action. The elder approached the protagonist and told him not to be upset because he had other jades. The man said that the whole surface is green, and he doesn't think there is jade in jade here. He squinted his eyes and realized something was wrong. Thinking about it, he called up the menu medical evaluation, substance analysis, substance processing analysis. Pretty soon he said to trim the oily part, because there is most likely another jade inside. The elders were extremely surprised at such an inference from the protagonist. Yanning said with a confident smile that something was hidden in the stone. The master continued to cut the stone, and the whole company tensed. One of the elders spoke and the man stopped, noticing something strange. One of the elders asked what kind of jade it was, while the others didn't realize what it really was. They were comforted by the fact that the jade was incredibly small. Suddenly the master said it was mirror green jade. The man said that he had heard of such jade before, because he was in another jade and did not expect to see it with his own eyes. Immediately afterwards, the man literally cried with happiness. The elder said that this was the first time he had seen such a thing. He wondered what kind of green jade it was. Linzong couldn't believe that it was really a new type of jade. Lin Xuan asked if her cousin knew anything about it. Linzong said that it looked more like glass than jade. The girl also said that it could possibly be a noble, imperial thread. Immediately afterward, the company shrieked with disbelief, for it was too good to be true. The staff member said that this was what his master was talking about. The man said that Yang Ning was only a jade carver and wouldn't dare to carve it further. He also said to find someone more capable. The elder thanked the master for his work, while another man asked what the price of this jade was, because it was so rare that no one valued it. Unexpectedly, Linzong turned around to the main character, trying to ask something. The girl smiled and asked if he would sell it. He instantly blushed at the seductive sight of the girl. Afterward, they stood looking at each other in awkward silence for a few seconds. The elders didn't take it upon themselves to stop them, and still watched the conversation as excitedly as ever. The protagonist raised his hand to his chin and thought hard. Yang Ning asked in his mind to give him time to check the board of completed quests. The protagonist realized that he had only 2 million to complete the quest, and the guy wondered if it was really. But it is worth it to put it aside because he is in no hurry to go anywhere. Right after that, he looked at the number of his points. The guy said that his goal was to earn as many points as possible, and the system offered to sell her jade at 2 million, and the girl at 8. The girl turned to the protagonist and said that she realized her question might be rude, but House Lin needed that jade. The guy suggested that this jade was not only valuable for Lin's house. The guy said that he heard that they were going to create a new jewelry brand, and this jade would most likely be used as a marketing move. Linzong said that he was right, and they wanted to use this jade as a blow to the Burman monopoly, because Myanmar had recently restricted the export of jade, so it was a serious blow to them. The girl said that this particular stone would not help Lin's house. However, Yang Ning said he was not ready to negotiate the price of jade at the moment. All the elders instantly opened their mouths, for they had not expected such an act from the protagonist. Linzong asked if he could listen to her proposal first, or at least give her a reason. He stopped the girl and said that he just didn't want to do it. He said to stop worrying about it because chasing profits isn't worth burning your youth. Linzong was silenced by such a remark from the protagonist without uttering a word. At the same time, Ling Xuan asked what he was really up to, and ordered him to tell her the real reason why Yang Ning didn't want to sell. He pondered the girl's words and re-questioned if she really wanted to know the reason. He said the reason was simple. He wanted to give it to his mother or future wife because he needed something to give his wife for her wedding. Ling Xuan only thought of Yang Ning hiding his true intentions, but she understood them. The girl remembered that she had originally thought he was just a regular bully, but his grandfather had rated him well. The guy is good in body, not stupid in mind. His sewer skills are top-notch, and he went through a lot to become like that. But he asked if this matter was so difficult to resolve because if Ling Xuan wanted Imperial Jade, then Yang Ning would take care of it. Ling Xuan instantly forgot about his entire assessment after all. This guy's a bully after all. Suddenly, the elder asked to consider a compromise. The elder said that he didn't know if Madame really needed this jade, but he could ask. He then asked if she definitely wanted to create a brand around one jade. Linzong replied in the affirmative. After that, the elder turned to the protagonist and said that since the guy wanted to give something to his mom, wouldn't it be better to make a bracelet? He said that one pair was enough for him. The elder said that old Lu would help them carve bracelets out of this stone, and they would give the finished products to House Lin, and he would make a nice profit from it. He thought about it and realized it was a good enough compromise. After that, the fire shook Linzong's hand and said that the deal was done. That same day in the evening, he was resting in his villa. and lying on his bed he checked the message and said that there was still a month left before the evaluation contest, and he should see what his score was. Looking at his performance, he wondered where he should allocate his 54 points. Ning thought that this was enough and wondered if he should take something else. The Royal Ace Manual came to his attention. The system said that in a short period of time, a trainee would gain the abilities of a summer soldier and would need to have 70 agility and 65 speed. He bought the book and thought after that kidnapping incident he'd better get some insurance. The main character said that the mind will live in wealth means, and his wife can be attacked, and he goes to the moment when you can perfectly save his wife. After that, he decided to lay out to distribute points among the characteristics. Quite soon, his characteristics increased again. He raised his hands and began to rejoice because he was approaching the level of Superman A and maybe Batman, and the ambulance his characteristics would be at B level. At the same time, the system began to analyze the training manual for elite soldiers. Suddenly he felt something strange. Immediately afterward, the main character's body fainted. It was like he was at the bottom of the sea. Once at the bottom, he began to absorb information. The man learned the basics of hand-to-hand combat. Immediately thereafter, he was shown the basics of the modern way of introducing warfare. Afterward, survival tactics for any terrain in the world surfaced in his memories. Absorbing all this information, Ning fainted. After a while, he woke up covered in sweat. He began to pant heavily and tried to realize what was happening around him. After that, he turned on the desk lamp. The protagonist picked up his watch and glanced at it, trying to gather his thoughts. He looked that it was only 4 o'clock in the morning of the same day, yet he felt as if he had lived 10 years in a dream and then returned to the living. Right after that, it was reported that Ning had only mastered one of the 3 parts, which he was not happy about. He realized that he had mastered hand-to-hand combat. He thought that this time was enough, and in the future, Ning would become an elite soldier. It was quite soon morning in Lin Xuan's villa. The girl woke up and started to pull herself up, yawning. Right after that, the girl went downstairs and saw the main character. The girl asked him what he was doing here since he was up so early. Ning was performing pull-ups at the time and said that he was just practicing. The man also asked where Lin Zhiqing and Tantan were, said Tang Tang went to school and Lin Zhiqing is sending with her company. He said it's very interesting that she has her own company because the girl was only a lingerie model. Lin Xuan said that she is not only a lingerie model but also the owner of the company. So what it? He fixed his gaze on the girl and blushed. It turned out that the girl was in a robe and the protagonist was visible all forms. Noticing the girl's irritation, he turned away from her. He smiled to himself and said, thanks to her pumping elite soldier, she no longer understood him. The girl was pouring a glass of water and asked the protagonist if he was preparing for exams and told him to come back early and study. The girl also asked him which university he was planning to join, to which he said he wanted to join Huanfu University. The girl handed a glass of water to the protagonist and said that this university is one of the prestigious universities in China, and whether the man can really get in there. He scratched the back of his head and said that he was usually in the penultimate place in the class every year. The girl exhaled and said that despite what his real level of knowledge was, but when he entered university, then the girl would cook a real dinner. The protagonist only made a joke about the girl. Very soon, he was on his way to school. Looking out the window, he thought that Lin Xuan didn't care anything about him. After all, he was really a bad student before, but the system would be better. Suddenly, he looked at the girl who had walked in, and Ning was surprised that even her back was beautiful. He tried not to smile, and thought only that it was better not to judge, because it was only from the back, and it could be a transvestite. Nevertheless, the man only hoped that she was really beautiful. At the same moment, the girl turned her head and said where the 7th block was. The guy was squealing with happiness because it's another beautiful loli. He looked at the girl with loving eyes. Suddenly the girl, as if sensing the hero's gaze, looked in his direction. He instantly became agitated and started pretending to look out the window. At the same time in the transport are, and 2 obscure men who looked at the girl with vulgarity. The man's companion said that this girl looked very good. The other said that as soon as she got off the train they would follow her and do what they usually do. While the men were distributing the heads, the protagonist only listened silently to what was going on. He squinted his eyes and wondered why such animals existed, since he had 500 ways to deal with them. It wasn't long before he was out to his stations. He started looking around and noticed something unusual. A girl like these 2 men also got off at the same station. While the girl was on her way to run errands, 2 men chased her. Suddenly the men called out to the girl and asked where she was going. The man approached her and asked her if she wanted to play with them, because they would make her feel good. The man also told her to give them her number because they wanted to be her friends. The girl apologized and said she didn't have her phone. The man asked if the girl was afraid of them and immediately called you to the Jingnong restaurant. However, the girl turned away from the man and said she was in too much of a hurry. The men then blocked the girl's path and started harassing her. All they said they just wanted to eat and then send her home. The girl started shaking and asked them what they wanted. She also told them to stay away, or she would call the police. The man said he didn't even know where she came from, and if Yang Ning sold her to the city, no one would notice. His companions supported him because these mountain men love girls and use them to give birth to slaves. The girl covered her ears in what she realized was intimidation and shouted loudly asking for help. He stood with the pillar at the same time and thought that she had finally called for help. Or else Yang Ning had thought that she could handle it by herself. He walked up to the company and coughed to be noticed, and the men turned to the protagonist, not expecting to see him here. The men started talking among themselves that it was the same guy who was on the train. Which man suggested to me that it was the guy who had been following them. Nay, he said he was just passing by, but saw them doing something here. Suddenly, the man swung around and told the protagonist to fuck off and not to piss them off. However, he caught the man's fist with ease. The bully clearly did not expect such an approach from the protagonist portrayed from Surprise. However, he showed with his whole appearance that he was bored out of his mind by this fight. The protagonist toppled the man to the floor with a slight movement of his hand. He clenched his hand into a fist and said that if they said so, he could say so too. While his comrade was convulsing on the pavement, the man began to shake as well. She turned to the main character and asked if this one really wants to die and if the main one doesn't know who he is. Yang Ning asked with innocent calmness what would become of it for him. He said this neighborhood is big, and he'll put them in the hospital for months, and do they really think they're going to get out of it and find the main character? The protagonist said that even if he's gone to the army, will they be able to pay since I do not know his true strength. At the same time, the man thought that what the protagonist said made sense, because he usually puts up fights. But if a real one happened, how would he be able to get revenge? Because he had no money or real power. The man asked why he was looking at him like that, and if he was up to something. He only smiled unpleasantly and said he only wanted to beat them to a pulp. The man turned pale at this statement and became very agitated. At the same time, another man finally came out of his stupor and pulled out a knife threatening to kill the protagonist. However, Yang Ning easily dodged such an obvious blow. Immediately after that, he and with sharp movements of his hand hit the man to make him let go of the knife. Immediately afterward, he delivered another blow to the man's back. It wasn't long before the man was lying unconscious on the pavement. He's a pathetic alack and said that he didn't think that he would lose so easily. And also said that he lacked strength. The main thing is that the hero smiled and said that it's bad to be strong and it's hard to find the right opponent. Because when he wants to beat someone up, he gets itchy hands. Suddenly he looked around and noticed that he had missed the girl. He said he only saved the beautiful woman, and she didn't even thank him and started complaining about it. He walked home dejectedly and thought he should forget about it. However, suddenly another man was watching him. He said that he was watching him. The man noticed that the man had close combat and sanda skills. The man became curious and wondered if he was from the army. Pretty soon he found himself in a cab. The driver said this neighborhood is only for the rich, and is he really sure he wants to go there? He told the driver they were worried, and to drive safely. Quite soon they found themselves at a checkpoint. He turned to the guard and said that he was working hard. At the same time, the guard was pleased with the protagonist and told his colleagues to let him pass. Pretty soon the cab drove on. He got out of the car and tipped the driver, for which he thanked him. It wasn't long before he opened the door with a sharp wave of his hand and said he was back. The protagonist's father shared the change in height and asked, does he take hormone pills? He went up to his father and said he hadn't taken any pills, just his body recovering from a good night's sleep. His father asked if he was growing up and said he'd better see a doctor. The protagonist's father stood up and walked over to him. The man was surprised because he was much taller than him, which was strange. He said he'd rather get hit by a car again to grow up. At the same time, in his thoughts, he was saying that he didn't care that he got taller because his system was incredibly cool. However, his father did not appreciate such jokes of the protagonist and told him not to talk like that. The man said that the protagonist had college entrance exams coming up and his teacher had called several times to hope that he would improve his grades. He agreed and said that he would go to his room to prepare. He went to his room and opened the door. At the same time, his father looked at his back. The man looked at the protagonist even as the door closed, but the man still didn't utter a word. At the same time, the Huanghai Elite Club had its own atmosphere. Zheng Xiao sat in a chair and drank a glass of wine. The man then put him on the table and asked the broker if he had returned yet. Then he held out another glass to the man and told him to go through and taste this silver bean wine. The man began to clumsily drink from his wine glass. After placing the empty glass on the table, the man said that the wine was quite good, and he had never tasted anything like it before. The man then asked if he could buy it at the grocery store. Zheng Xiao resented the question. After all, this wine is one of a kind, and a beggar like him is not allowed to drink it. After that, Zheng asked what was going on with the main character, and if he was still alive. The man said he was watching him now and asked for more time. Zheng Xiao asked, "What's the matter? Did this guy have a strange background?" The man poured more wine into his glass and said he had assigned the case to a friend of his who works for the Department of Homeland Security. The man said that they haven't found anything yet, but there is something they haven't confirmed for authenticity yet. The man also wants to warn Zheng Xiao. Xiao asked what he wanted to warn him about. The man said he better not mess with this guy. Zheng resented this warning and asked who this guy was after all. The man said there was a trending video on the internet recently of a hotel employee being fired and an intern being promoted. He said he went to the hotel and got the guy's address. His address was a big villa in Nanhui. Zheng wondered what he was doing in this small prefectural city, and then asked if he was rich. The man said that he was incredibly rich and that his family could be much richer. The man also expressed fears that he might be living with Ning Jigo. Zheng Xiao asked who he was. The man said that he probably didn't know who he was, but he had definitely heard of Ning Guoshan because he was influential in Jiangning province. Yang Ning then said that he was called Kaiser, or God of Wealth, that he was very influential in the province. The man also said that before he died, the old man blessed this man, and if someone would restrain his impulse, he could be proclaimed in Asia. The man also said that the person who lives with him in the mansion is his brother. Xiao abruptly realized the situation and interrogated. Could it be that Yang Ning is the same God of Wealth? The man said that he wasn't done yet because he had discovered something that Zheng Xiao needed to hear. The man said that in public everyone thought that the Ning family only had 2 sons, but in fact they had a daughter who married 12 years ago to Yang. Zheng wondered if the Ning family had brothers or sisters, and if the main character had a double last name. Zheng Xiao then asked if the man had figured out what kind of Yang was. The broker said that he had not yet. The man said it doesn't mean there's nothing about him, just that he and his friends don't have rights to see the information, and he's probably not that simple. The man suggested that he was from Beijing's Yang family. Zheng Xiao asked sharply, "What else is the Peking family?" The broker said it was unclear how many Yangs there were in Beijing and advised me to drop it. Zheng Xiao couldn't believe what the informant had told him. At the same time, there was a great atmosphere in the villa. He was talking on the phone with his sister while looking through the system messages. His sister asked him if he was studying hard. He said yes. His sister said his mom wants to come and see him as well as his sister herself, so he should come and get itch. He, looking at the messages, said he would come, but just why would his sister follow his mom going? Suddenly my sister shouted an offended expression into the receiver. He, after putting the phone as far away as possible while yelling, brought it close to him again and told her not to yell, and asked her if she had no exams. The girl said her grades were fine and she was just worried about him. He immediately hung up the phone and said that he would go to school. However, the girl was not satisfied with this end of the conversation and tried to stop him. However, the girl didn't have time and complained to her mom that her older brother had hung up on her. Her mother told the girl not to worry, for when they visited her brother she would teach him manners. The girl went up to her mother and told her that she loved her and that her mom was the best. The woman told her daughter to go to her room and do her homework. Overjoyed, the girl ran to her room. Immediately after her daughter ran to her room, her mother hesitated and stared silently at her back. He was browsing through the system's messages and thought he should check around the store to see if there was anything useful. When he came across one main item, the hero was surprised that the item was in stock. The system described it as Zhao Wei's brain expansion potion. After using it, the left hemisphere would improve, and there were no side effects. He noticed that the item cost as much as 1,800 points, and it was very expensive. And so the protagonist immediately hit the buy button, putting up with the price. Pretty soon, the strange flask was in the protagonist's possession. Yan Ning looked at the bottle with excitement and disbelief. Opening it, he sickened with disgust as he poured the entire contents into his mouth. He closed his eyes and analyzed his condition. It wasn't long before he opened his eyes, trying to make sense of the change. Trying to test his new knowledge, he walked over to the bookshelves. The guy grabbed some book from the shelf and started reading it. 3 minutes later, he finished reading the book. The boy satisfactorily recalled the entire contents of the book and realized that he knew it perfectly well. The main character's eyes lit up and he said that the potion was worth his money because he was able to memorize everything at once. He realized that his reading speed had improved 20-fold. He was praising the potion again in his thoughts. He hoped it would always work, because the changes were drastic. The guy literally danced happiness, because he realized that now studying will be easy for him, and he will nagnite exam. He decided to check how many points he had left. As it turned out, he had only 470 points left, which for a guy was catastrophically low. Yang Ning realized that if there was no future auction trading, it would pay off, and the system would be the best option because he needed the points badly. He came to the bed and said that's fine. As he laid down on the bed, he thought he needed sleep to complete his mastery of the technique, and he wondered what would happen next. Pretty soon he fell asleep, and was actually studying all kinds of military equipment. He walked calmly to the entrance of the school. He felt like he hadn't been at school in forever, but it had only been 20 days, and he had changed so much. He realized that he was now an extraordinary guy, and his memory made any task incredibly easy for him. The protagonist shuddered, and realized that only geniuses felt such a sensation. The man looked at his watch and realized that you still had 2 hours left for your exams. Suddenly, someone shouted at the protagonist from behind. The full guy walked up to the protagonist, happy that he had come. The guy said he heard he was in an accident and he was here to check it out. Suddenly, the protagonist was happy to see him that everything was okay. He wryly said that he had everything in place, or the guy wanted him dead. The guy said it wasn't funny at all, and he lost weight from excitement. He started squeezing the guy's cheeks and said he was still his little chubby friend. The man scratched the back of his head and said he had lost a little weight after all. Suddenly, someone called out to the company of the protagonist. A guy in formal clothes asked the protagonist if he had been in an accident. The guy said that everything seemed to be in place, which was bad for him because he expected to be left disabled. The protagonist's friend said that since Wang Jihuang had nothing to say, he should keep quiet. Wang Jihuang asked if he was really talking to him and ordered him to close up. Zhao Xiaofei said to make sure that no one touches the protagonist. Wang Jihuan told the protagonist's friend to mind his own business. Zhao Xiaofei said that he does whatever he wants and doesn't care about his opinion. Wang Jihuan offered to fight, to which Zhao Xiaofei agreed. The man pointed back with his hand and said that since it was gym class today, they would compete there. Wang Jihuan said he heard that they were having a 1-kilometer race. At the same time, suddenly was clearly clueless about what was going on. Suddenly instantly looked at the protagonist expecting help. However, immediately afterward, he said that the challenge was accepted, and they were waiting for him at the stadium. Wang Jihuan called them brave and stupid. The man said that whoever has the smallest time wins. Wang Jihuang turned his back to the company and wished them good luck, because they would need it. Zhao Xiaofei tried to stop him, but he couldn't. Zhao Xiaofei immediately began to shake his whole body, because Wang Jihuang had recently broken the record, and they would definitely lose. Yang Ning said that since it's a competition, they should make a bet. The guy turned to the main character and asked if he was laughing at him. He asked if he was afraid of the bet. Wang Jihuang laughed and said that since that was the case, he agreed, and whoever loses would run 10 laps without pants. The hero said that since it was his terms, let him not regret it. Zhao Xiaofei tried to stop the protagonist, but he couldn't. After the conversation, Wang Jihuang headed out to go about his business. Zhao Xiaofei started crying to the protagonist that he would run 10 laps without pants because of him, because he would definitely not win. The guy says to look at him and ask her already, and he looks upset, reassuring the guy. Zhao Xiaofei could not say anything and only laughed. Yang Ning smiled and asked if he wasn't the one who got into stories every time, and that Zhao Xiaofei had told him not to socialize with him like this, and not to call him bad. The first one started listing stories he'd been involved in. The first was a story about 2 dogs that someone kicked out of the yard because it was hot. The guy continued that 2 months ago, he had a fight with Wang Jihuang and started to scare him into screaming like a girl. He said that last time he ran into Teacher Zhao while he was sleeping, and after that you bit him and said that there were fleas flying around the school. Yang Ning recalled the incident of how someone's snake ended up in the pipe from Lao Jai's motorcycle. However, Zhao Xiaofei tried to stop him. He said, "Many people think that Zhao Xiaofei is stupid, and anyone who thinks so is always in his sight." Zhao Xiaofei asked, "How does he know all this since he is so good at covering his tracks?" and asked him not to make nonsense. He pulled his friend by the cheek and said that he had been friends with him for a long time and knew him well. The boy also said not to be afraid because no one would cause him any trouble. Zhao Xiaofei asked what the main character's plan was after all. However, he did ask before he did how hard this one wanted to hit him. The whole guy definitely wants him to get hurt. The guy said he knew how to get him to run 1 kilometer. However, Zhao Xiaofei was extremely agitated and did not believe the protagonist. He put his arm around his friend's shoulders and told him not to worry because his drug is better. There are no side effects, it will just improve his fitness. He also said that he can only use it once. Zhao Xiaofei thought about this matter very seriously. Right after that, Zhao Xiaofei decided to believe the protagonist and said that they would. He started to say that he would prepare the potion later and Zhao Xiaofei himself needed to drink it discreetly in class. After that, Zhao Xiaofei asked if he had heard about the new beauty in the class. However, he said he had seen too many beauties lately. Immediately after that, he thought of Lin Xuan, Tang Tang, Lin Zhiqing, and Lin Zong. Quite soon, he and Zhao Xiaofei were on their way to their classroom. The protagonist walked into the classroom with a smile, and Zhao Xiaofei looked behind the protagonist and opened his mouth. As it turned out, that new student was the girl from the train. He was also very surprised because he didn't expect to find her here. He walked up to the girl and said hello. Raising his hand in greeting, he said they saw each other again. The girl didn't expect to meet the main character here either, and asked if he was okay. The girl thanked the protagonist for what he did. Bai Yang Ning said not to worry because it was easy for him. At the same time, Wang Zhihuang was angry. After all, he had just gotten into an accident, and how did he meet the beauties in this month? But Yan Ning said that if the girl wanted to thank him, they should eat together. The pouty guy grinned lishly, and thought that this kid thought he was a bullshitter, and would be rejected 100% of the time. The girl smiled at the same time and agreed to the proposal. She scheduled a meeting at an establishment nearby at noon and asked if everything would suit the protagonist. Wang Zhihuang was extremely surprised that the girl actually agreed. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei joined the conversation and asked if he could go with them. The girl couldn't say anything, and the protagonist grabbed his friend and told him not to pay attention to him because he was still on a diet and shouldn't socialize with him. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei thought that it was not cool at all because he had just become the enemy of every stallion because he had just betrayed him. Wang Zhihuang. Wang Zhihuang was already seething with anger and couldn't utter a single word. The man shouted to the protagonist's company not to forget about their parry because he would definitely take them down. Comrades Wang Zhihuang began to say that these two idiots would not be a problem because they would just throw them out. At the same time, the guy himself ordered not to say it to the protagonist because recently he was in an accident and Kajas for life will be crazy. The girl asked what parry and what's going on here. Wang Zhihuan said that he and his company had settled with him parry on the fact that if they won him in the race, he would run without pants. Wang Zhihuang mockingly said could Fatty really beat him, and everyone started laughing. Suddenly, the teacher came into the classroom and told everyone to sit down because the lesson was about to start. Whose time Zhao Xiaofei stretched and thought that since math was boring, he'd better get some sleep before the competition. He watched his friend sleeping peacefully on his briefcase. Suddenly, the protagonist's gaze drifted into the distance. He closed the book and thought he'd have to catch up on every subject he'd scored on. Yan Ning was effortlessly writing something down in his notebook while looking at the book. The band guy was only angry that he was pretending to read, because in the guy's opinion, it was already clear to everyone that he was worse. Suddenly, the teacher walked past the protagonist, looking at his notebook. The man was extremely surprised at what he saw with his own eyes. The man told the protagonist that his calculations are different from their calculations. However, he ignored the teacher and continued to write himself something in his notebook. The teacher was surprised time after time by what he wrote. The teacher realized that this was a more logical version of the calculations they were going through, and wondered what had happened to the protagonist. The man understood that such calculations are not the level of the school, and not all students of math academies are capable of it. He smiled and said he was done. An unexpected math teacher praised him, and said his calculations were very good. The teacher corrected himself on his glasses, and asked him to tell him how he came to this. Did he really have a professor and his tutors? He stammered and said that he came up with it himself to cut down on calculation time. The guy said he thought it was better than the school way. However, the teacher did not believe it, and to himself only thought, how dare he pretend? I had a man ask me a long time ago who he was trying to cheat because this method is used at the university. He got excited and said he really hadn't read the textbook. The teacher thought about it and decided to analyze the main character for pretense and suggested, could he really be a genius? Suddenly some woman approached the company and asked what the main character's name was. The math teacher was surprised by Teacher Liu's arrival, while Zhao Xiaofei said that the main character's name was him. As the woman approached the protagonist, the guy himself blushed. Wang Zhihuang thought that he had offended the teachers, and so he was now in bad luck. The woman asked why Yang Ning was getting such bad grades, since he had a predisposition for math. The protagonist averted his eyes and said that he had just recently started practicing math. The woman twirled her head and fingers, reasoning over what was said. Zhao Xiaofei leaned towards the protagonist and asked, did he really know her? He squinted his eyes and asked, what a stupid question since they had been friends for a long time. Zhao Xiaofei said that he has changed incredibly, and he is not like himself because he is full of surprises. He asked, does Zhao Xiaofei think that the real he is dead, and Yang Ning is just a fake? Zhao Xiaofei said that he hasn't seen him for a month, and today he finds out that he has a connection with a handsome teacher. The guy also asked the protagonist to give him some advice as a friend. He said it's easy because if he gets hit by a car and doesn't die, he'll meet God and have everything but fat tomorrow. Hear what mocking reply Zhao Xiaofei sent the protagonist. He wondered what his friend was so unhappy about, since he seemed to be telling the truth. Pretty soon the lesson was over and companies started gathering around discussing things. A crowd of girls gathered around the main character and praised the boy. Many were surprised that Liu's teacher praised him. One of the girls asked to see the protagonist's work and praised it while the protagonist enjoyed the company of his classmates. At the same time, the pouty guy was extremely pissed off because the main character was just a nerd and what was so interesting about him. Xu Guanyuan approached the protagonist and asked if Yang Ning could help her with her work. And on Heroes, he said there was no problem with that and told her to hook up with him. At the same time, the pouting guy was watching the conversation between the girl and the protagonist. The guy tisked and thought that it still wasn't over. The man was determined to prove to Xu Guanyuan that he was an insect that he would crush. It wasn't long before English class started, and the teacher invited everyone to sit down and announced the start of class. Zhao Xiaofei motioned to the protagonist and said to look at the teacher, calling her attractive. She, as he was completely oblivious to the teacher or staring into a book. Xiaofei was very surprised at this turn of events and thought that he was no longer a man, frightened by this thought. At the same time, he was diligently learning English while watching messages from the system. He realized that learning a foreign language is very important, especially English, because it is very common. Yan Ning said that he hadn't taken the time to do this before, but now because of Lin Ziking, he was obligated to master the language. Unexpectedly, Yang Ning found a language degradation book among the system store, because thanks to this book, they will be able to master the language in the native language. He calculated the number of points. He had 470 of them right now, but he needed 10 points. If he bought this book, he wouldn't be able to afford anything for a couple of days. However, putting his doubts aside, he realized that this item was very useful, and bought it. Immediately thereafter, the system displayed a message that the language erudition book had been received. The system warned you that it was starting the memory injection. Suddenly, he felt a rush of knowledge. While he was synthesizing knowledge, he got bogged down in his thoughts. Suddenly, Zhao Xiaofei called out to the protagonist and tapped him on the shoulder. The guy was concerned about the protagonist's condition. Unexpected, he didn't realize where he was, and now began to swivel his head. It turns out that all the classmates were laughing loudly and pointing their fingers at the main character. He finally lifted his head up. Refused there was an English teacher standing there? The woman asked the protagonist if the exam was a trivial matter for him. The teacher also asked what the college entrance exam meant to him. He said that in his opinion the exams are the doorway to university. On them he will be tested, broken, bent, and more. The teacher said his idea was right, and asked if he was joking. The woman said that the Chinese profession has taken care and created a system whereby they can get a job with a good diploma. However, he asked what kind of joke is this since they are obligated to spend 13 years to then work for someone else. He sent that kind of thinking. The woman slammed the protagonist sharply on the table and asked exactly what he said. The teacher said she would then ask if he had listened to her lesson. Did he study well? The woman said that when the students don't work, the teachers are sad. The woman asked the protagonist if he didn't think he had to work hard to make his parents proud. Yang Ning got up from his desk and told the woman to keep her nose out of other people's business, especially the main characters. The boy also said not to touch his parents, because this is a school after all. But the woman said if he kept talking like that, she would call his parents. He said that since the teacher asked him about the exams, he just said whatever was on his mind. The guy also said that if she didn't like his answers, she shouldn't have asked, and said not to bring government business into it. The teacher said she didn't involve the state here and she would just let him translate some things. Suddenly the whole company was surprised and stopped the conversation. He realized that he had completely missed it when they switched to English instead of Chinese. The whole class stood in great shock, watching the altercation between the protagonist and the teacher. Suddenly, the teacher came to the classroom door. A classmate asked the teacher to explain what they just explained with the main character because they were talking very fast, and it's a very difficult topic. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei started crying and said that they know that he is now. It is not his friend after all, he is already dead, and there is an alien standing in front of him. He sarcastically said that he remembered the main character. Yan Ning squinted his eyes and looked at his friend, telling him not to talk nonsense. Other classmates marveled at the protagonist's knowledge and asked what he was talking to the teacher about. He said coyly, scratching the back of his head. At the same time, in his mind, he had no idea how he should explain it. Suddenly, one of Wang Jihuang's comrades turned to him and asked, did he suddenly become wise after the accident? The man turned to him and asked with anger in his voice if he wanted to get smarter too, because Yang Ning didn't mind hitting him with his car. At the same time, the teacher takes the combined hero called the principal. The English teacher was very surprised because he speaks native English and has a voice like a British newscaster. The woman realized that if she had not studied him for 2 years, she would have thought he was a foreigner. Suddenly, someone knocked on the office door. The teacher apologized to Miss Chen for the intrusion and went to the classroom. The man said there's an exam next week, and said he hopes the students will consolidate everything at home. After that, the teacher looked at the main character. He was perplexed by the look on his face, but decided to ignore it. It wasn't long before all the lessons were over. He and the English teacher were in the room, and the woman was checking the main character's grades. She said that she was sure he would pass the exam, but asked why he had scored below 50 on the 5 tests. The girl turned to the main character and asked if he had a reason for this. He stammered, and wondered if she would believe him if he said he was just into foreign languages lately. Listening to the main character's answer, the woman realized that he was incredibly handsome, pumped up. The teacher blushed and realized that she too was holding back. After that, the woman turned her head and dismissed such thoughts. He is only a student after all. The teacher turned to the protagonist and said his colloquial was too pure, and asked has he ever been abroad. He said he was not there, to which the teacher was surprised because the accent of the hero's head was even better than her own, and asked where he got it. Yang Ning said he reads books, listens to music, watches dramas, and he does it all in English. He said he just copies and repeats. The woman squinted and didn't believe the protagonist that with just parroting it was possible, and thought he was hiding something. However, the woman didn't give it too much thought and said he could go. At the same time, the company found itself in the school's stadium. Zhao Xiaofi asks one character if the potion really has no side effects, and what he did with the English teacher. He assures the guy that there are no side effects, and dealing with the teacher is not his problem. He then held out a vial of the potion to his friend, and said that this potion would help him run fast. However, if he wasted all his strength, he wouldn't even be able to lie down on the bed. Zhao Xiaofei took the potion from the protagonist, and said that if he could teach that bully a lesson, he would at least stay for 10 days. Immediately afterward, the guy drank the entire potion in a volley. At the same time, he clapped his hands and said that now he was just about to learn about the side effects. He asked, "How did it feel?" To which Zhao Xiaofei said that it was delicious. Suddenly the guy's eyes bulged in different directions. He was frightened by the change in his friend and asked what was wrong because he was worried. Very soon, Zhao Xiaofi exhaled and said that he had a cool feeling. He then turned to the main character and asked where he got it because the guy is full of energy and feels he can do anything. However, he was still worried and asked if he was sure he was okay. Zhao Xiaofei said that there was nothing remarkable. However, they fat people are born with bad metabolisms. But because of the potion, it feels like his metabolism has increased, and it's like everything is on fire. He clapped his comrade on the shoulder and said that they had a hard life. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei said that the main character's hand was heavy and told him to stop making jokes on him. At the same time, the gym teacher raised his hand and told everyone to get ready. He adjusted his clothes and was about to take off his jacket. After he took off his jacket, his muscular body was visible. All the girls instantly blushed and called the main character handsome. The gym teacher asked why Yang Ning hadn't shown his muscles before, because his jacket hid everything, or if he didn't want to be seen. He only laughed awkwardly at such a remark. Suddenly, Wang Jihuang approached the protagonist and, calling the protagonist a dwarf, asked if he would compete. However, what the guy did not expect was the fact that the protagonist was decently taller than his classmate. The guy was extremely surprised at the growth of the main character, because just a month ago he was only 170 centimeters tall. And did he really use hormonal? He asked which dwarf the guy was referring to. Suddenly, Wang Jihuang paid attention to the main character's shoes and said that it was all nonsense. After looking into the main character's eyes, the guy said that his shoes were the reason he was so tall. After that, the guy went to the teacher and asked him to do something about it because he was cheating. When asked by the teacher what happened after all, Wang Jihuang said that he wasn't that tall and asked him to check his shoes. However, the teacher only looked approvingly at the protagonist and said that usually at his age no longer grew while his muscles grew along with his body. He joked that because of the accident not to the guests, most likely increased. However, Wang Jihuang turned to the protagonist and asked if he was really listening to him. The man looked at the whole thing and said it was a normal shoe size, so everything was fine. Yang Ning joked about whether the guy had any cases against tall people. At the same time, the guy was frightened by his words. Zhao Xiaofei pointed his finger at the rascal and laughed. He asked him if he thought that shoes would help him grow taller and if he had a good head. The teacher was surprised to see Zhao Xiaofei and supported his aspiration that he would run for the 1-kilometer race. At the same time, the guy approached the teacher and said he had an argument with some of the guys and asked him to be the judge. The teacher said he'd heard of it, but they're usually always the first to give up that distance. Zhao Xiaofei said that today was different, and he decided to teach some people a lesson so that they wouldn't bully him. The teacher praised Zhao Xiaofei's attitude and asked who else wants to participate. He and Wang Zhihuang volunteered for the competition at the same time. The teacher wrote something down in his notes and said that they would be the 4 of them first to go to the race. The teacher said that they were following the rules of the competition, and to win you had to have the lowest time. The teacher raised the signal gun up and the students assumed the running position. All 4 of them stared intently into the distance. After a while, the teacher let out a gun signal that signaled the start of the competition. The teacher let out the signal fire and the competition began. Zhao Xiaofei, with an incredible effort, he rushed forward and actually overtook Wang Zhihuang, while the latter was extremely surprised. The guy got excited about his victory, because she didn't expect Fatty to be able to run that fast. The rest of the class had not expected it either, and they opened their mouths in surprise. The teacher was surprised to notice something. Turns out he and one other contestant didn't even start. He asked why the kid wasn't running. The classmate said that as soon as he ran, he would run too. He offered to wait until they were done, and then they'd run. The guy agreed to that. Suddenly, one of the classmates noticed that Fatty was actually going first. Overcoming the difficulties, Zhao Xiaofei was indeed a meter away from Wang Zhihuang and overtook him. Comrade Wang Zhihuang wondered why his friend was lagging behind this Fatty. Some classmates wholeheartedly supported the sassy guy when others only laughed at him. The man rushed into the distance with all his might and shouted. Zhao Xiaofei was surprised at such a scream and turned back while Wang Zhihuang himself was telling him not to run away. However, immediately after that, apparently frightened, Zhao Xiaofei accelerated forward even more. Wang Zhihuang was shocked by this and was perplexed as to how this was happening. The teacher was also extremely surprised by the fatty's outburst and watched in silence. It wasn't long before the guys finished the race and it was the main character's turn. He smiled and realized that his battle had begun. Zhao Xiaofei supported his comrade and said that if he didn't run, he would be the first. While Zhao Xiaofei barely made it to the finish line, comrade Wang Zhihuan had just started his race. At the same time, Wang Zhihuan himself was very tired, and from crepiture with tremendous shortness of breath, he barely made it to the finish line. Suddenly he turned to him and said that he was very slow and he lightly caught up with him. As it turned out, he stood still while Wang Zhihuang approached him. The man started yelling at the protagonist why he wasn't catching up, because otherwise he would lose. The teacher asked in bewilderment why he wasn't running. He scrunched his nose and said he gave him a head start. Wang Zhihuang called the protagonist a fool. However, right after that, the protagonist began to run away rapidly, instantly overtaking Wang Zhihuang. He ran at an incredible speed without losing his breath. The teacher was extremely surprised that the main character was incredibly fast. He easily overtook all his competitors and ran on. Comrade Wang Zhihuang watched the protagonist with breathlessness. The guy realized they were estranged from each other, he in heaven and he on earth. The main character's run was watched by his classmates and teacher. But what no one expected was that the main character would set new records. When he crossed the finish line, he broke the record. An excited teacher called the principal and told him that one of their students had broken the national record in the 100-meter dash. The principal, along with another senior person, instantly ran down to the stadium. The teacher wondered what the director of the Ministry of Education was doing together with the school director. The principal said it was the right guy and told the teacher to clock in again. He started running again on the high school track. The teacher recorded a run of 1 minute and 33 seconds, which turned out to be a new record. The principal asked if the teacher knew what record had been recorded before. The teacher said that in the year 1997, Wilson Kipter had set a record of 1 minute and 44 seconds. The director said to watch for another 200 meters. Maybe he can do it here. The protagonist's comrades began to support the protagonist. Pretty soon he was over the finish line. The director asked what time it was, and as it turned out, he had run 2 minutes and 2 seconds. The principal asked if he had broken the world record again. The physical education teacher said that the world record was set in 1996 and was 2 minutes and 11 seconds. The director started waving his arms violently with excitement. He shouted that he had broken 3 world records in one day, and if anyone said the Chinese were bad, he would roast them. However, after that, the The principal calmed down and asked him to come over and tell everyone to be polite, because he might be a celebrity in the future. Immediately after the race, the protagonist was approached by several female classmates who began to praise his awesomeness. At the same time, they said that he had broken the world record. Suddenly, he asked what it was about. After that, the main character was approached by Zhao Xiaofei and told that he had broken 3 records. He's scared because 3 world records is a pretty dangerous undertaking, and he needs to figure out how to avoid it all. Suddenly, someone in the classmates said it was the same guy from the hotel incident. Suddenly, everyone in the school found out that the main character is the same glorified man from the video. The girls even started to compete that he would be their boyfriend. At the same time, another girl said she only cared about money while the other girl said she just liked his face. I've already been suspicious of the protagonist from the back. A beautiful girl asked if they could be friends. Classmates instantly started whispering because these are the top 3 ladies from their school who don't like to socialize with boys. He said hello to the girl who came in and shook her hand. He began to analyze her look. He was surprised that she had a good look without greed or bad motives. The protagonist wondered what her purpose was. At the same time, the girl reflected on the fact that he looked like a bully, but is actually a daredevil. He asked for a chance to ask her something. He asked if she really wanted to be friends with him. The girl asked if she was not suitable to be his friend. Well, he smiled and said he wouldn't mind making a beautiful friend like her. The girl praised the main character's ability to use the language and said that there are a lot of problems from him. The girl said they should stop pretending, and she had some things to discuss with the main character. The girl told the story and said that she just needed money for leukemia treatment because Teacher Lo had run out of money. The girl said that she is the president of the student council this year and invites people to help the teacher. But he was surprised at the very nature of the problem and asked again if she really just needed money. Zhao Xiaofei said that he could donate 10 yuan and then change that number to 20 yuan. He asked Riley if everything but 10 yuan was in his stomach. Zhao Xiaofei started waving his hands and said that he would just later with them the money and donate it. He asked how much he planned to donate. The guy opened his wallet and thought about finances. In the end, he said he could probably donate 500 yen. After hearing that answer, he clapped his buddy on the shoulder and said that even that amount is good. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei cursed the protagonist because everyone is so rich, and he still wants to go to McDonald's and buy 5 Big Macs and then drink them with milk. After that, Zhao Xiaofei asked the protagonist how much he would donate. The guy said that since his friend was donating 500, he should donate more. After that, he said he would donate about 50,000. Everyone was instantly shocked by such a huge sum. Zhao Xiaofei was instantly at a loss for words, unable to ask the protagonist anything. The girl interrogated whether he really wanted to donate 50,000, but he asked why everyone was looking at him like that, and if 50,000 was not enough. After that, he agreed to donate 100,000. Already after this statement, everyone was not only shocked by the situation, but petrified by it. He took his smartphone and asked the girl for the account number, and he'd transfer the money. The girl tried to stop the protagonist, however she couldn't clearly say anything. He interpreted it as a question about cash, and said he didn't have that kind of money in cash right now. However, the girl merely wanted to say that it was very bold, and she would not dare to take such an amount. The girl said that it was better to give such money directly to the teacher. He scratched his head as more problems came up. At the same time, he thought he needed to study everything he'd skipped before. After that, he grabbed Zhao Xiaofei by the scruff of the neck and said that they would go together and asked him to take them to the teacher. Zhao Xiaofei lightly slapped the girl's shoulder and told her to rely on him. The girl got nervous and said that the teacher's daughter was in Nianhu Hospital. She offered to meet the teacher at that hospital tomorrow. However, Zhao Xiaofei was upset by the girl's words and the whole, as it turns out they won't be alone. Pretty soon, gym class was over. All the teacher told everyone to go back to class. It wasn't long before he ran up to his teacher, who was incredibly proud of him. He grabbed the protagonist by the shoulder and took him aside to talk. Wang Jihuang said that he was disgusted by it because he thought he was a superstar. He started listing all the nicknames of the protagonist and refused to accept reality. Suddenly, the guy remembered the bet. While Wang Jihuang's face was turning even more purple just in time, Zhao Xiaofei came over and said with a smile on his face that loser was undressing and running around the court. He then asked with a slight smile if he wanted to pay with money. Wang Jihuang was very surprised that Zhao Xiaofei was asking for money from him, while comrade Wang Jihuang was refusing to participate. Wang Jihuang was incredibly broke. She said that they would compete again next week at the base test. Zhao Xiaofei was angry because he had already lost, so he should pay for it, or he is not a man who does not admit his loss. Suddenly, a crowd gathered around the guy and began to condemn Wang Jihuang. turned around from Zhao Xiaofei and said that he would let them win, but only this time. Zhao Xiaofei with a smile. He looked at his back and chased him away while showing his middle finger. It wasn't long before he found himself in the principal's office. A man invited him to come closer and told him that he had distinguished himself at school today. The man then asked him what the protagonist's name was. He said his name with a smile on his face. The man said it was a good name. Then he congratulated the protagonist for breaking 3 world records, but the protagonist thanked him for it with a bewildered look on his face. At the same time, he wondered what kind of guy he was, since everyone treated him with the utmost respect. Suddenly, the people behind the man sitting in the chair said that if he wanted to, he could become a student of Jiangning University, and that they had already contacted, and once he said so, they would immediately apply. He scratched the top of his head and asked what the special request was, and what they were talking about. The man told the protagonist not to worry because it was a kind of reward for success. Then the man told him to take his time and think it over. Immediately afterward, the man standing behind him suggested that the protagonist have dinner and talk about the future. However, he began to refuse, saying that he had his own business to attend to. It wasn't long before he left the principal's office and went about his business. He exhaled with relief and thought that Xu Yuan had invited him for lunch, and he didn't have time for the old ones. Suddenly, a message about a hidden quest popped up to the protagonist. As it turns out, he had completed a hidden quest called Someone Likes You, and the reward was a system upgrade and new tabs. So he scratched his chin and wondered if some wife or hottie liked him, because the system was always inaccurate. It wasn't long before he was outside the hospital. He checked his account on his phone, and suddenly everyone around him looked at the screen. Zhao Xiaofei shrieked at how much money the main character had, but he said that he got it all wrong, while Zhao Xiaofei with a purple face was listing the number of zeros. Zhao Xiaofei said it was somewhere around 9 million as he told him to check his eyesight. Suddenly, Zhao Xiaofei yelled out where the protagonist got the 9 million from and if he had stolen it. Then Zhao Xiaofei said that he owed them fried chicken, only he didn't keep the gobble closed. He handed a slip of paper with a receipt to the girl and said he had transferred the money and asked her to take it to the teacher. Xu Yuan quickly nodded and said that she would definitely give them to the teacher. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei leaned into the protagonist's ear and said that he had to give himself to carry why he sent her. Xu Yuan leaned over and said that they could also go later, and they should go out for lunch. She then asked if Zhou Qian would go along with them. The girl agreed to go while Zhao Xiaofei asked her to wait for him. While the company was heading towards the restaurant, but the protagonist was being stared at by strangers. It seemed to be Wang Zhihuan and his comrade. The comrade asked what kind of guy he was and said that he would only live for a week, while Wang Zhihuan said to be careful with him, for he was evil with tricks. The comrade laughed in his mind because he knew that he had broken 3 world records, and Jiangning University had given him special access, and he had defeated Zhao Xiaofei with money. And when he heard about it, he thought that it was just a story. The guy turned to his comrade and told him to warn him that there would be no party because today he would be studying for an exam to restore his honor. Quite soon, the company of the main character approached the restaurant. The waiter approached them and asked if they had a table for 3. However, Zhao Xiaofei was extremely angry that he wouldn't even be considered and shouted out that the table was for 4. He put his hand on his buddy's shoulder and told him not to be angry because he would buy him fried chicken. Xu Yuan turned to the protagonist and asked them to stop here since they needed to go to the bathroom. Zhao Xiaofei asked the protagonist why he was paying for lunch since he was invited here by Xu Yuan. He asked, "Is Zhao Xiaofei an idiot? How can a woman pay for a man?" After Zhao Xiaofei looked at the menu, he was drooling. He asked where his fried chicken was. He said it was a Chinese food restaurant. After the food arrived, Zhao Xiaofei said that the fried chicken looked incredibly appetizing. Taking the chopsticks in his hands, the guy asked where Zhou Qian and Xu Yuan had gone and what they were taking so long to do in the restroom. He got worried and said to sit there since he would check, and he thought they were in trouble now. Zhao Xiaofei was surprised, but said that he would help the protagonist. At the same time, after the restroom, the girls were accosted by some men. Xu Yuan asked what they wanted from them, while Zhou Qian hid behind her back. 4 grown men, most likely gangsters, said they should have lunch together and have a drink at the same time. One of the men also said that they would make it very good for them. The girl's interest backfired and sent them away. However, the man said that the girl liked his boss and told them not to kick, or they would sell them to a brothel or start a club where they would be torn apart. Xu Yuan instantly shouted to the entire restaurant and asked for help. The man got close to the girls' faces and said that no one in China cared about anyone and no one would help her, for it was his street. Suddenly through some door came another wrinkle, and asked to be quicker, as the director could not stand it any longer. And the man said that the beauties were resisting, and asked what to do about it. Then he pointed his finger at the girls, and told them to stop resisting because they were making Principal Jun very angry. The comer said just calm them down and waved his hand. The man laughed and surrounded the girls while the company tried to resist. Suddenly, Zhao Xiaofei flew into the back of one of the bandits, throwing him off balance. The man, lying on the floor, asked who did it. Zhao Xiaofei stood up and said with a smile that they were all kaput. While Zhao Xiaofei was shaking off the dust, he said that now it was clear why the girls were taking so long, since they had been captured by some scum of the underworld. Xu Yuanyuan said with tears on her face that the bandits had taken their phones and now wanted to kidnap them. He walked up to the girls and told them they could have lunch later, and now he would deal with the men. Watching this idol of one time, bandits told his guys to piss on them without regret. It wasn't long before several men with bats and clearly bad intentions were heading towards the protagonist. He punched one of them in the stomach. Coming back from the attack, he elbowed the other bandit off balance. Pretty soon the man was lying in front of the protagonist, unable to move. The man who gave the order to attack the protagonist, all covered in sweat, and asked, "Is he really a soldier?" He smiled and said he was just an ordinary student. Hearing the protagonist's answer, the bandit said to hold him and not let him escape, because the man didn't care if he was a soldier or an apprentice if he insulted him. Then consider that corpse. Zhao Xiaofei approached the protagonist with a worried face and asked if he was crazy, while he smiled and said that sometimes people do stupid things. After that, the guy asked Zhao Xiaofei to protect the girls while he dealt with the bandits. He squinted his eyes and realized that now was a good time to test the ace's aids, because these people only understood the language of pain. The protagonist smiled even wider and thought that he was using the bandits as a training dummy, and maybe they could handle it. As he approached the gang, one of the crew told them to be careful because the guy is attacking. Suddenly he did a leg swing and sent the man into unconsciousness. The same man fell to the floor unconscious after the blow. The rest of you are so not freaked out that he was so strong. One of them said he was very strong, but told him to stand still until their boss came. He instantly sped up and grinningly said that he was extremely scared and swung his next punch. Suddenly, he threw several punches to his opponent's chest. With a final blow, he toppled his opponent onto his back. The man started convulsing and realized that he had hit him on his pain points. However, this was an extremely rare technique, and the man ended up unable to move. At the same time, Zhao Xiaofei, Xu Yuanyuan, and Zhou Qian were watching the protagonist with their mouths open. The same man asked why he wasn't still working on it since time was running out. However, the man didn't have time to say his thought like that, and opened his eyes and mouth wide with surprise. Immediately afterward, the man ran back in from where he had come, waving his arms in fear. Suddenly another group of people came to the company of bandits, apparently the rest of the gang, which began to threaten the company of the protagonist. He smiled broadly and rejoiced at his new victims. Immediately afterward, he kicked the nearest man. Pretty soon, and their part of the gang that managed to get up was lying on the floor beaten and begging for help. Suddenly, two men approached the main character's company. One full-figured man told Mr. Liu to call the director and report the problem. He smiled and asked if men alone had backups. He pulled out his cell phone and started dialing. Zhao Xiaofei did the same thing. He called his father and asked if he was having lunch with the mayor right now. After that, he started to explain that someone had trashed a restaurant in the upper city also tried to kidnap a girl, and asked him to tell him about it. The entire gang heard the conversation between Zhao Xiaofei and his father, and stared at him perplexedly. Him in the eye and called Uncle Liu, saying he was facing a problem in the form of asshole director Jun, and asked if he knew him. The man told the protagonist to call Secretary Zhao of the Provincial Politician Legal Committee and call Director Ho. Hearing the main character's call, the gang was even more surprised that he knows some big shot from the legal committee and Mayor Ho. He put it on speakerphone and Uncle Lee's voice was heard from there, telling the protagonist not to worry while he was vacationing in Nanhu. The man said that no one would touch him and both would pay in full. The gang was extremely frightened by the protagonist's connections. Suddenly, a man approached the company and told them not to bother Mr. Liu, for he would deal with them himself. The bandits looked back and saw many people in formal clothes. When the classmate saw the newcomers, she recognized her father among them and was happy to see him. The protagonist and Zhao Xiaofei were surprised that the girl knew the man and called him her dad. The man told his secretary to call the old man Ho, something he agreed to. Right after that, the secretary called and said that Mr. Shu wanted to invite him to a luncheon in the upper city, and he was very angry. He realized that the man was Shu's uncle Zhubai. A man approached the protagonist and thanked him for helping his daughter. The man said he didn't even know how to thank him, and now he would protect her more. He told him not to worry because they were friends. The man appreciated the main character's martial arts and said that he is strong and tall, and he doesn't even see his daughter because of him. At the same time, Bandits was even more frightened because he had no idea that he knew so many important people. It wasn't long before the police arrived and forced all the bandits into a car. Father Shu Wanyuan said such schools deserve praise. He got all covered with sweat, and with a strained smile said that the man's thank you was enough, while thinking about what everyone was afraid of, so his thank you was a blessing. The man asked why he was refusing, and he couldn't say anything. He scratched the back of his head, and first that smile said he had exams coming up. Shu Yuanyuan's father said that he accepts the main character's thought, but will remember what he owes to the main character. The man also said he heard he donated $100,000 to help with a child's leukemia treatment. He scratched the back of his head and said that it was indeed true. The man was extremely surprised, because the entire Nanhu Third High School had only raised $30,000. The secretary said that when he returned he would keep a closer eye on Secretary Shu, while the other secretary said that on Monday he would gather the school's leadership to make a fundraiser among them. Father Shu Yuanyuan nodded his head in agreement with the suggestion. Suddenly someone called out to Secretary Shu. A full man came rushing to the secretary in a hurry and asked if everything was all right. As it turned out, it was Zhao Xiaofei's father. Well, he asked what his father was doing here, and Zhao Xiaofei said that he told my mother to my father that Secretary Shu was here, so he came running. The man apologized to the secretary and said that children don't always think right, and he probably had a hard time dealing with them. At the same time, he approached Shu Yuanyuan said that he did not expect that she was the daughter of the secretary of the city committee. The girl said he misunderstood and she was living with her mother. He was surprised that their parents were separated. The girl blushed and said that it was no big deal because her mother was just a housewife. The girl folded her arms and looked awkwardly at the protagonist. At the same time, Zhou Qian looked at the unfolding situation with an incomprehensible expression. The girl was surprised at the fact that both Zhao Xiaofei's father and Uncle Lu had come and wondered what kind of people they were. However, the very next day the atmosphere cleared. He yawned widely and realized that it was the weekend and he should take a walk. He decided to visit Uncle Lu while he was on the road, since he had asked for his help, and explain everything to him. Because he noticed that since the video was no longer on the hype, it would be recognized so much. Suddenly, an unknown number called the main character's phone. He picked up the receiver. Uncle Joe answered and asked him if he remembered him because he had made an order. He finally recognized the voice and asked how the man was doing. The man said that if he wanted to look at the order, they should meet at the stall sometime. He asked if he had anything he did besides carving. The man said he was asked to sell something and said he could show it to the main character. He agreed to the proposal and said that he was just nearby, so he would come over soon. He thought that even though people wouldn't recognize him anymore, he should be careful not to hurt Uncle Zhao. It wasn't long before the protagonist was in the right place. Uncle Zhao waved at him and beckoned him over while he himself was near the bicycle. He wondered what the man had that kind of thing. At the same time, he mentally tried to activate the system. However, the unexpected protagonist's face was covered in sweat. A message appeared about a system update that would complete in 48 hours. He was clearly unhappy with the situation and clutched his head in distress. He cursed the system for updating at such a time. Meanwhile, Uncle Zhao asked if the protagonist was all right. Suddenly, he looked at what the man had brought and was greatly surprised. In spite of everything, he noticed the unusual box. He mentally exhaled and realized that the system updates were not interfering with the Eye of Truth. The man opened the box and asked if there was anything the protagonist liked. He wondered if the glow was coming from the box, and it looked old and shabby. The guy wondered if it might be an antique. He asked how the man got the box. Uncle Zhao said that he had it a long time ago, so he didn't really remember it. He raised his hand to his chin and thought. He didn't want to cheat the old man. But if he offered a high price for the crate, he wouldn't agree. The boy asked if Uncle Zhao had a problem recently. The man only exhaled from the protagonist's question. The master said there was a problem, and even that was not really a problem, because he needed to find a teacher for the village children. He asked if they didn't have teachers there. Uncle Zhao said that they had bad roads lately, and until he started traveling, they were isolated from the world for 6 months, and the teachers didn't want to deal with them because they were hard to reach. He asked how bad the roads were, and said that they just needed to tell the landmarks of the area. The man said that there was a clear river running near the village, and that the village itself was located next to a mountain. The man also said that if there was a road there, they could sell the fruit they grow there. The main character went to Uncle Zhao and asked if he could help with the problem. The man said that they needed about $100,000 to make the road. and they didn't have that kind of money. He said that money is not a problem for him because he can spend 2 million on this project. The man asked, what was the benefit of such an action from the guy? He said he just wanted to do a good deed and maybe they could develop planting. After the protagonist's response, the man cried and said that he was Liu Jigao's benefactor and he was trying to show his respect. The man stopped him and said that he didn't need to bow because he and the protagonist were friends. He handed the card to the man and said that the password was 6 sixes and that he would contact the DSSU in a couple of days. The old man thanked the protagonist profusely and said that if he needed to grow anything, he could always apply. He said they should talk about it when they get new roads. The boy waved goodbye to the man while the old man himself rode back to his village. He was still staring at the older man's back and was glad that everything had gone according to plan. Soon enough, he found himself at Ling Xuan's house. Lin Xuan's father poured the protagonist a cup of tea and asked him if he really wanted to seriously build roads because the price for 10 kilometers of 10 million. However, the man said there was a lot of money to be made from them. He said to stop kidding him because it was just a small village and he just wanted to help. He said Uncle Zhao gave him some box and he's going to look at it later. The man said that the protagonist is impressed by everyone in the family. The man also said that Lao Feng and Lao Shu consider him their comrade and Lao Meng wants to marry off his daughter to the protagonist. The man also said he heard he was God over the bandits. He said it came out completely by accident. Lin Xuan's father asked if he really think he would believe it. The whole he was able to see even the imperial jade. After that, the man said that there would be a meeting tomorrow and the protagonist should appear there. He was surprised at such news. The man said that he can pretend, but he already knows that the protagonist has talent, so he should come to the competition because there will be experts there. He asked if Uncle Lu Bo was really sure about it, and maybe someone else should go. Afterward, he asked if this case was related to Liu Hu. Lu Bo's uncle said that Liu Hu is just a pawn in the game, and he has his sights set on the commander. He asked to be allowed to deal with Liu Hu, which Uncle Lu Bo obviously didn't expect. Lu Bo wanted to ask what he was going to do about Liu Hu since he was hiding well. After taking a sip of tea, he said that did Uncle Lu Bo think the driver was at fault. Uncle Lu Bo asked if he really felt that way. He said that Ms. Lin was incredibly beautiful, and the man most likely wanted to appreciate her rather than kill her. However, the action had only one intent, to destroy her as soon as possible. He smiled and said he thought the motive was one of envy. Uncle Lu Bo thought about it and said that the main character's thoughts made sense. The man thought he was right because she was an idol for many men and only a woman could do it. He warned that it was only his guess because he didn't know Ms. Lin's entourage. Uncle Lu Bo said he was a good man for reducing the number of suspects and thanked him for that. The man smiled and said that he would soon find the true culprit. The next day, he and Uncle Lu Bo were at the meeting place. The company got out of the car and headed for the entrance. Lu Bo's uncle said that today it was up to the protagonist, and even though everyone would think that he was embarrassing himself, but he should defeat them. He laughed and agreed to the proposal. The unexpected company was approached by an unknown man who recognized the old man Lu Bo. The man laughed and asked if he had come here to lose money. Lu Bo's uncle was clearly unhappy with this statement and said that no matter what, he had the money. But whether they could take it away was another matter entirely. The man asked did Lu Bo really think he was a mobster and told him to get lost. Lu Bo only became even more angry at this statement. He stopped Uncle Lu Bo and told him not to talk to that mobster, because he's probably had bad luck with roulette lately. And this time he'll lose more than ever. The man became extremely angry at the words of the protagonist, and asked if he really thought he was a failed mobster, because he thought the guy was picking a fight. As it was, he ignored the man and turned to Lu Bo, suggesting that he go inside. However, the man didn't stop him from censuring the protagonist. He smiled and said that he was asked by some mistress. He should hire someone in a 5-star hotel. They don't let people like him in here. Lu Bo said that Yang Yinggu should calm down and asked him to leave him alone. He smiled and said that he had learned from the best and would easily crush him. The man said he wouldn't forget it and turned to walk away. Looking at the back of the insolent Lu Bo warned the protagonist to be careful with him, because people like him will remember it in the future. At the same time, Lu Bo said that he also has people, but he covers his tracks better than him. He said that Lu Bo is also full of surprises, and in some things they are similar to him because they are probably friends. Hearing the protagonist's reply, Lu Bo put his hand on the protagonist's shoulder and told me to test my fate. Suddenly he heard an unkind remark in his direction and turned back. As it turned out, Zhou Xueben and his father were standing there. He asked if it was Zhou Xueben, and she told him not to be afraid because he was working as a goldsmith again. Joe Schweben asked didn't he expect the latter to meet him here. He said it was nothing, but he really didn't expect to see him here. Lubo noticed Joe Scheben's father and squinted his eyes. It was as if a spark of hatred ran between the men as they looked into each other's eyes. Those observing the altercation were surprised because they didn't even hide it. Suddenly, another unknown man approached the main character's company. He and Lubo looked to the side together and were greatly surprised. A certain man adjusted his tie and said that he and Lubo hadn't seen each other in a long time. Unexpectedly, Lubo realized who it was without much surprise. The man asked if it was really Yu Shu. After that, he squinted his eyes and asked if the one was cooperating with the bastard. Yu Shu said that he invited Uncle Lu and Joe to represent his companies. Jubo Kong said that President Lee is very polite if he thinks that this company is small, then most of Nanhu's companies are garbage. Du warned Yu Shu to stay away from the protagonist, and started to tell the story of the protagonist. However, he was stopped. Yu Shu said that the business is changing and before who pays him the most is the one who plays. Yu Shu waved his hand and said that they would chat later since he was busy right now. Lu Bo was extremely angry at this behavior and told the protagonist that he was either too naive or was playing him knowing what Old Man Joe really was. He looked at the man's back and thought. His intuition told him he'd be difficult to deal with. He imagined him as a pawn cheating everyone else on the chessboard. Yu Shu at the same time turned to Zhou Bo Kang and asked if there was something that made him angry. Zhou Shueben said that he had recently deceived his father. The man with a slight smile, he said that he had heard that Zhou Bo Kang himself had sold him these stones. Zhu Bo Kong said that the president was right and told his son to stop telling it and behave culturally. The boy tried to tell his father that you can't keep it all to yourself, but he was stopped. Yu Shu said that they were protected by the company, and the man hoped they would defend his honor since he had no experience in such a case. Yu Shu handed a glass of wine to Zhou Bo Kang and said don't make the same mistake twice. The holy knows that that kid has a good ability. Chuba Kong said he understood everything. At the same time, in another part of the hall, someone was cursing Lu Gaosen. It turned out to be the same man who had an argument with the main character's company. With a grim face, he said that he would remember what they had done today. At the same time, the man behind him told him to calm down, because as far as he knew, Lu Bo was gambling without rules, and asked if he understood him. The man asked his buddy if he really thought it was okay to pretend to wait until he was killed. The guy said that they wanted to humiliate him publicly, so it was better not to count the money. Taking his buddy's hint, the man asked if he really thought Lu Bo didn't know anything about jewelry and was easy to catch. The man covered himself with a fan and said that the main game is stone cutting, so if they don't cut the stone, they will ruin the reputation. It wasn't long before the fair started, and everyone went inside the hall. Lu Bo turned to the protagonist and said that he didn't know how to determine if there was a stone in neuritis and asked the protagonist how he understood it. He said that jade can be detected in stones by several factors. He began to explain that he had to look at the stone. For example, he took a stone that had a certain pattern also resembling the rising sun, unlike the others. He said that in this stone there was a high probability of jade. He went on to say that in order to accurately determine if a stone has jade or not, one must look at the outgoing yin energy that displaces the yang energy from his hand. But it also depends on the location of the sky. Everyone who listened to the main character's story wanted to send him to a psychiatric hospital, because they thought it was delusional. However, Lu Bo only opened his mouth wide and asked the protagonist if there was any jade inside the stone, to which he said that there was and could most likely sell what was inside. However, they would need to check when the stone was cut. Suddenly, someone stopped the protagonist and surrounded him. The crowd began to shout. Could he really be mocking and using wuxia to check if there was jade in the stone? For many people thought it was a fraud. Lu Bo told the crowd that they misunderstood him because it was his nephew and not the wuxia scammer. However, the crowd did not believe the man and told him to stop talking nonsense because he should listen to his elders, and they have serious business here. He asked people if they thought the rock was empty. He thought the whole situation smelled like a setup, and if so, they should teach the idiots who hit on the protagonist and his uncle a lesson. Suddenly, someone said that this stone was not a jewel. He returned to the source of the voice. At the same time, the whole crowd, along with Lu Bo, looked at the same place. The protagonist was approached by an unknown man with a cheeky smile and a confident rose. He smiled and asked if the man wanted to make a bet. Unknown asked what the conditions were. He said he would pay him 1 million if at least one of the 2 stones had a jewel. If each stone had a jewel in it, then the man would lose. The smug stranger said that since this would happen, if there were 2 jewels, he would give him 1 million. At the same time, the man realized that all the stones with the jewels were collected elsewhere and could not be at the public exhibition. He said a man has a much better chance of winning. It's not fair to the protagonist. The man offered 5 million and asked if he would accept the deal. He agreed and said not to blame him if he lost. The guy said he had a chance and all the dice were rolled and fate took its course. The man asked, is he worried about him because he thought he was too proud? Lubo said he looks too nervous and the stakes are only a couple million, so if he loses he'll pay for it. At the same time, Joe Schweben approached the company and together with his father. Joe Schweben smiled smugly and said that it would be unrealistic for 2 jewel stones to be found here. However, Joe Bokong grimly said that this stone with jewels. Joe Schweben abruptly turned to his father and said that he was just lucky that time and didn't believe in such coincidences. However, the father got angry and started yelling at his son, why is the main character lucky? Who is a scumbag his son, because if it were otherwise he could sit at home and drink tea. At the same time, the crowd was only saying that on 1,000,000 yuan, a family could live for several years, and that he only loses from it by being impatient. At the same time, the man who argued with the protagonist told the hall employee to cut the stone. Afterward, the rival said that by meeting the protagonist, he got a good car for 1,000,000 yuan. He turned to his rival and asked if he was really going to spend just 1,000,000 yuan to buy a car at this time. Such an expression offended the man, and he turned to the protagonist. He asked again if he really planned to buy a car for only 1,000,000 yuan, because every man who respects himself would buy a car for several thousand million yuan, and that's what real bosses do. The man was extremely offended by such a suggestion, but could not say anything in response. He squinted his eyes and said that if he understood correctly, the man was currently using a car worth less than $1 million and condoled with him. His rival took even more offense. The man told the protagonist not to spend money wherever he could, because he was saving money, because money is hard to earn. But he pointed to Said behind him and asked if he was really frugal or joking about it because, playing with that kind of money, he has no right to use that word. And here he is frugal because the old money is only on verified bets. He said he came in a car with Lu Bo. The guy asked if the man knew Gust cars. The man stood in a stupor because he couldn't answer the protagonist. He clarified that the name of the car was a Rolls-Royce Gust, and that's what normal cars are called. Noticing the reaction of the man in charge, the hero said that he looked like he didn't know about the million-yuan car by sympathizing with him. He opened his eyes and asked if the man thought he was better than Lu Bo. If so, it was too presumptuous. The man was surprised by such harsh words from the protagonist and started calling him names. He went on to say that some people are content to drive a car priced at less than 1,000,000 yuan. And some people don't even know a car for 100 million yuan, which he considered backward. The man said he talked too much for a young guy, and he wouldn't let a red-haired guy explain to him about thrift and all that nonsense. However, Lu Bo said that he no longer had to be afraid because his nightmare had already come true. It seemed that the people had already cut the stone and there was indeed a jewel there. The slicer said it's just green grains, and it's not what he expected. At the same time, the entire crowd was incredibly surprised that the main character was actually lucky. Gawkers began to discuss the main character, and absolutely no one believed that he was really lucky because there is no way to check the stone for jewelry. The protagonist's opponent was covered in sweat and surrendered to the question of whether not all the stones had been taken away, and how the 2 boulders had turned into jeweled stones. The hall staff member then said he would begin cutting the second stone. The protagonist gave his good while the opponent said that this rock is absolutely definitely plain paper. However, disregarding his opponent's shouts, the master began to cut the stone. The master said he has cut already into 6 pieces and jewels and he can't see. The protagonist's opponent started laughing because he was sure of his early victory. As he made an uncomprehending face and asked if the man wanted to raise the stakes. The opponent was surprised at this attitude of the protagonist. He asked if he was not a real player, since he had a better chance than the protagonist, and asked if he wanted his 1,000,000 yuan car to be turned into a good car. The man said he didn't mind, and since the protagonist had no chance, he would just give him the money. And Lu Bo walked up to the disputants and said that the protagonist had confidence in this and said to increase the stakes. Lu Bo said to increase the bid by 10 million. The entire crowd was extremely surprised at this increase in stakes. The man starts to realize that his intuition says there's some kind of catch. However, the man still believes that if he wins, he will get a huge amount of money. The man turned to the company that was discussing something behind his back. The 2 men smiled and looked at each other. It wasn't long before a man and from that very company approached the company of the protagonist. He asked if he could join and asked Lu Bo and Mr. Bao's opinion. Lu Bo wondered if the man was also interested in this. Then Lu Bo approached the protagonist and said that if he wins, he will give him a sports car, otherwise he will list the stamps giving the choice to the protagonist. He thanked for the trust from Lu Bo The protagonist's opponent got even more excited. The same man asked if he could bet 50 million. Lubo thought about the proposal and pondered for a while. Lubo looked around and asked if he could afford to argue for 50 million since he usually couldn't even afford 20, and if he had appeared to have some patronage. Immediately after that, Lubo's eyes turned towards the investor. The investor himself said that Lubo had incredible powers of observation. Lubo squinted his eyes and guessed that he was the investor. The man asked if they sent Bao to harm his nephew, and although this move is very interesting, but it is useless. Ka said that yes, it seems really pointless, but they, the old foxes, need to update their knowledge to keep up with the young foxes. The investor then turned to the protagonist and asked him his name, most likely to be better than his goofy grandson. However, unexpectedly, Lubo blocked the main character's path and said that no one could surpass his nephew. The investor laughed and said the man reacted as if he was going to kidnap him. The man told him not to worry because he had a family with grandchildren. He squinted his eyes and thought to his intuition that these guys were snakes. The protagonist's rival held out a check for 10 million, and Mr. Bao held out a check for 50 million. Both of them had tense expressions on their faces. However, they agreed to the deal. The craftsman continued his work and cut the stone. Lubo approached the main character and asked if he was really sure about it, and he said he would bet 100 million on himself if he had the cash. The crowd told the master not to doubt since the last cut was left. The probability that this stone really contains the jewel is equal to 10%, and he is a complete fool for there can be no jade in it. However, the master would say quieter and fetch him some water. The crowd was surprised and asked what was wrong. The man said he reminded him of the old men with archaeology, and they too used wuxia to find the right tomb, and the man didn't think he would meet people with such skills. The master said he was surprised that he knew the technique, and said that perhaps his skills would help identify hidden bloodstones. The protagonist's opponent and Mr. Bao tensed up a lot, and asked what the master meant. The master said that, to put it bluntly, his method could become popular. Man asked from where it will become popular, and what exactly will affect it. The opponent said that they should already cut the stones to find the jewel, and Lubo was greatly surprised. The crowd started shouting that they would buy this stone for 2 million. At the same time, someone offered 5 and 6 million. Someone desperate even said to keep the stone in exchange for any jewelry in his store. Pretty soon, the crowd circled the protagonist and told him to agree to 10 million. At the same time, he himself was perplexed as to what the bloodstone nonsense was all about. He mumbled that people are offering 10 million, and can't they wait for the system update with only 2 hours left? At the same time, the master said that it wasn't a bloodstone, but just a brightly colored red ice stone. The crowd instantly realized what the man was talking about because the kind of bloodstone is ice seed, and it is an incredibly rare jade. The crowd as quickly as possible began to talk at the company level and tried to make their bets. At the same time, Lubo looked at the protagonist's opponent and said that he wanted to take the check now. Joe Schweben was surprised that he had actually obtained the ice seed. Right after that, the guy asked his dad what it all meant. However, Joe Bokong was already sobbing with anger and trembling despair to have him recall all his losses. Joe Schweben realized as quickly as possible that he had managed to cheat his father out of imperial stones and they were sold for pennies. However, at the same time, the crowd began to speculate whether Master Jianshi had made a mistake or deliberately deceived them. However, another said that the judgmental was blind, because he had said that he used wuxia to determine the values of the master would not have pulled off such a thing. The protagonist's opponent shouted and accused the protagonist of being the reason he lost 50 million. Mr. Bao approached his investor, said that gambling, it is not his, while the investor himself was angry that he asked the man to do business to make a steady profit. Suddenly someone came to the company of the protagonist and said that Jellyween had lost his nerve, because if he lost, it was his problem. The man with a cigarette at his mouth told him to stop acting like an idiot, or he would be embarrassed because he knows the rules of gambling. Mr. Bao and Jellyween became nervous and looked at the man who had come. Mr. Bao asked that the man knew about it because that guy was trying to fool them. Jellyween said to calm down and move on to the next plan. He held out a check for 5 million. At the same time, the protagonist himself, Lubo, held out a check for 10 million for him. He thanked the man for his generosity. Lubo asked, isn't he going to talk about avarice because thanks to the protagonist, he won 50 million? He said he basically did nothing and picked 2 random rocks and said a couple words and the rest of the people just weren't restrained. He turned around and said that he didn't think there were so many rich pigs who wanted to give away their money because you can become yourself. That is a beggar because kings are ruled by the beggar's greed, and he liked it here. He was going through the system messages and read a message about transferring 15 million to his bank account. He said his balance sheet was 24 million. but the mission indicator multimillionaire was only at 8 million. He scratched the back of his head and thought it was probably due to a system update. Suddenly, someone called out to the protagonist. It turns out that Lubo approached the protagonist and said that his friends wanted to have lunch with him. He was surprised at such an offer, and asked if they really wanted to have lunch with him, and if they wanted to buy his jade. He clearly said that he couldn't sell it right now, but Lubo said that they are not interested in his stone, and they want his advice, because wuxia technique will be the most discussed topic, and soon. Lubo said doesn't he want to keep the jade for Miss Z. He said he didn't want to sell it because he had enough money for now. Lubo said saving money is a good habit for high school students, putting his hand on the protagonist's shoulder. He said that if someone wants to talk to him, they should talk to him because they are rich, and only unconnectedness will not prevent him. Lubo exhaled and said to his age he was completely distracted. The main character smiled and said, "Lubo, don't worry about this video, we'll handle everything." It wasn't long before the protagonist was surrounded by a crowd asking to hear about how Uzia's technique worked. Ira began to explain the principles of the imaginary technique. Pretty soon the crowd dispersed and thanked the protagonist because they had learned a lot. The protagonist, despite waving them hello to silence, actually exhaled and said that it's unbelievable how many people believe such a thing. Suddenly the main character got a message. He looked at the two panels. One of them said online reputation accounting, and the other online title accounting. The system said that getting a title added new things such as an exclusive item or a discount from increasing the title. The effect of the bonus would increase, and more bonuses would be unlocked. He realized that it was like the VIP system in online toys. He called up the system window again and decided to check what his level was now. He saw that his level was shown as civilian, and his religion work and skills were blocked. He looked at the message dejectedly and realized that the stats were blocked because of his level. And maybe when he leveled up, he would be able to unblock them. The main character said that you have to trade prestige points to get experience to improve the title, and prestige points can only be gained by completing missions. He decided to check what the prestige store had. He was very surprised because there were only 3 items in the store. Suddenly he opened his eyes and was greatly surprised. He looked at a beautiful egg whose contents were unknown. The system said that there was a chance of discovering excellent quality, in which case the thing might be worth a lot of money. He was already starting to think about what would happen when he broke it. He then turned to the system and said he wanted to buy a scroll and asked how he could do so. However, he suddenly noticed the store's refresh timer with just under 10 hours left. He wondered if this store had a time limit and realized that once that time expired, items would disappear. He grabbed his head and realized that there were less than 10 hours left. He needed to complete 19 prestige missions in order to buy the egg for 19 points. He squinted his eyes and decided to see what prestige missions there were. He marveled at the fact that he'd managed to complete 3 missions without him realizing it. The system showed one of the completed missions, the essence of which was to use his skills, new experience and skills to create reaction and attention towards himself. Suddenly he turned around and saw the crowd looking at him with burning eyes of adoration. He raised a hand to her chin. She said, "It was probably due to the technique because it drew attention and reaction and a new experience." Another mission that he managed to do was the mission of using his charm to win the sympathy of the other 50 people. The third mission was about gaining the respect and love of the others. He smiled and said that he remembered where he got it because it was a mission he completed yesterday on campus and received 100 coins and 1 prestige point. Okay, the hero opened his mouth and said that if everything is calculated, he has 9 prestige points right now. He only needs 10 points. He decided to see what other missions prestige could do right now. After reading the mission description, he realized that the daily missions are easy. But here's, friendship is our everything. That's a whole other conversation. He calculated that he now had the sympathy of 63 people and 37 left. The guy also said that the stone exhibition was the perfect platform to impress people. Realizing this, he thanked Lubo. He clenched his fist and realized he had to do it. Suddenly, someone greeted the protagonist, and the guy turned toward the source of the sound. A company of a man and a woman stood there. The man said that they were from the Wen family, and said that they had heard that the protagonist had a special way of testing stones, and asked if they could ask any questions. He shook hands with Mr. Wen and said hello. He looked at the business card handed to him. The business card had only the gentleman's name on it, no companies or numbers. He scratched his head and changed since he can give his card right now. Mr. Wen said that there was nothing wrong with it. He said he was here to meet the main character, and asked if he could call him brother. He said he was okay with becoming friends. The guy pinned the girl down and said that this was his daughter-in-law, Jo Ye, while the girl herself tapped her soulmate and told him to stop being rude. He said he had a good daughter-in-law. The girl said that he was rumored to have found a red jade and asked if he could look at it. He agreed and handed them the stone. The system rated this item as bright red jade, which the public likes. He marveled at the scoring system and realized he needed to check the box later. The girl asked if he could show the stone. He agreed and handed them the stone. Pretty soon he was standing over another rock and pondering. He said that when this stone is exposed to the air, it dries and fades. The guy also said that it was full of life on the inside, but dead on the outside. He said this stone was hidden to you, Gleb, so it didn't flourish under the sky. Because of that, it's not particularly valuable. He turned away and thought that, in a nutshell, it was all a load of crap. Mr. Wen said that rogues weave nonsense without speaking, calling themselves sages, and all the masters would follow the protagonist. The girl was also excited to learn the technique. The crowd watched the teachings of the protagonist, and many people thought that hiring a master technician was much easier than buying up all the stones. But at the same time, an ordinary person would not be able to learn it, because Wuxia master was a great thing. He smiled, and thought he really liked being a master technician. Pretty soon, Lubo walked up to the main character, and said that there was food on the table and called the main character downstairs. He waved goodbye to his master and sister, saying he would go first to eat. The company waved goodbye to the protagonist and said they would see each other later. And when he and Lubo went downstairs to have lunch, the man watched the protagonist's back. The man was looking so intently at the protagonist that even his sister-in-law noticed it. The girl asked if the gentleman was interested in him. The man said that even though he is young, but he is very interesting. The girl asked if he didn't want to know where he was from, to which the man replied with a counter-question who said he didn't want to. The man turned to the girl and asked if she didn't think it was a rarity to see such a young man here. However, the girl tapped the man on the forehead and told him to remember why they came here. The master said he would do his part and asked if she didn't trust him. At the same time, the protagonists were surrounded by people even during lunch. Everyone would come up to the main character and ask him what he thought of this or that stone. He squinted and realized that the number of people interested had increased to 72. It wasn't long before a post sounded during lunch. At the same time, Jellyvon's company was sitting at another table. Mr. Bao slammed his hands on the table. He clenched his fists and said they were disgraced. Mr. Liao said that their opponent was a boy, and this move would open up new areas of the city for them. Likewise said, go all the way for the bosses. At the same time, Jellyween asked what the man was up to. Mr. Liao was startled by such a question, but said that this situation did not only affect their boss's honor, it was also to decide whether they could defend their territories. Mr. Bao said it is a very good decision because everything will be left behind if they fight for business with them. They will get their money. The mysterious man said that everyone has their own honor to protect and offered to open the stones. It wasn't long before he was alone with Lu Bo. Lu Bo said that his assistant Shu went to school because of that. The main characters questioned what Lu Bo was trying to say. Lu Bo said officials think the whole area around South Lake High School should be recreational and shopping and riding. Lu Bo said she went to the school to talk about this and happened to hear that they wanted to build a new school. Lu Bo told the protagonist to take this project seriously because they will rework the whole economy and want to invite Ning Kai-shen as an investor. He thought about that name. Lu Bo asked what he was thinking about, throwing the guy off balance. He waved his hand, but he couldn't say anything. Lu Bo decided to ignore it and said that everything was fine. Lu Bo said that today they open the area for high-level waves of players, and you can start playing with 100,000 or 1,000,000. And Lu Bo said that he learned how to play jade stones, and it is addictive. Lu Bo, with a serious expression, told the protagonist not to get carried away with the games even though he knows the definition, but he might miss and lose everything. He raised his eyebrows and thought that Lu Bo himself had brought him to the gambling stone exhibition, and who really out of the two of them and not into it. An unexpected Lu Bo left the protagonist and said that his enemies would be more serious in the evening, and asked him to be more careful. He squinted his eyes and said the man had just lectured him about games, but was already making him play. Immediately afterward, he and Lu Bo entered the hall together. Zhou Sheben said he heard and got angry. Zhu Bo Kang only turned around and thought that he had moved to the Changyang group. So he needs to confirm then the assassin of the president of the jewelry. The man squinted his eyes and said to his son that they should watch. People crowded around the main character and he explained that this rock changes every minute it is born and dies. Mr. Wen asked the protagonist what he's trying to say. He said to draw the gentleman's attention to the rough surface. The guy also said that there was a curve and then a bend. After that, he said that simply speaking, there are rare minerals inside the stone, and what kind of minerals they will find out when they cut it. Some man said that since he said there was a jewel inside the stone, and he was willing to bet on it. It wasn't long before the master began discharging the stone. After finishing his work, the man said that there is jade in this stone, but unfortunately it is small and not precious. The man's eyes lit up, and he thanked the protagonist for the experience of the first stone cutting, which, although it didn't pay off, was still important to the man. The man thanked the protagonist once again, and perhaps a hand to him. The crowd cheered the protagonist, saying that despite his age, his skills are already excellent. He smiled and realized that he only had to find 4 people to complete the task. Suddenly, some waiter approached the protagonist and Lu Bo. The man said that the company had been invited to a millionaire's neighborhood, and a certain Mr. Hu said he had a good offer. Lu Bo turned to the main character and said that they should go to the table of high-level players. At the same time, the crowd also heard this conversation and decided to follow the protagonist. Jubo Kang watched this situation while his son asked if they should watch it. Zhou Xueben said that in order to enter the $1 million zone, one must spend 10 million on stones, otherwise the director will blacklist them. Jubo Kong said that Mr. Lee gave them a limit of 20 million, and they can buy anything in the house. Although said he hates that accounting thing, as you have to count everything you bought, and man does he love the freedom. Chuba Kong told his son to be in the shadows, because anyone who bets has a special power behind him. Zhou Xueben told his father not to worry because he understands how to behave. Mr. Bao said Jobo Kong went with his son, and asked if they would go there. Jelly Ween said they had a small budget, and was clearly not happy about it. Suddenly someone called Jelly Von by name. As it turned out, there was a certain Master Kun standing behind them. The master was greatly surprised that Jelly Wan still remembered an old man like him. Jelly Ween took a chair, and kindly told the master to take a seat here. Jelly Ween said he would introduce them now. Master Kun. This is the best master stone appraiser, both in their city and in the ancient industry, and the man has many occupations. The master's fans gathered around him and favored him as they considered this meeting a great happiness. At the same time, Master Bao, trembling with his whole body, said that if the master had come earlier, they wouldn't have lost. Master Kun asked who was playing with the man leaving in the fights. Mr. Bao, this is Liu Guoxun from South Lake. Mr. Bao cried and said that Lu Bo had performed his friend to make them play, and it was because of their actions that they lost 50 million. The crowd that was watching the conflict break out realized that half of what he said was made up in the first place. Master Kun said he knew the man, and he seemed to be from a good family, and presented himself as a decent person, and he didn't think anyone would stoop to the level of using a Trojan horse. The master told the man not to worry because he would call the organizer right now to fix it. Jelly Wan waved his hands sharply and tried to stop the master. Both men immediately realized that it was better not to touch the master, because if all the lies were revealed, they would not live. The master asked why they were standing and would they be so offended. The old man said that he had no right to humiliate them by using his dirty tricks. Jelly Vian said that after they lost in the stone games, they lost their dignity, and they won it back along with the money. The master got angry and asked if you really wanted to play with that snake. The old man said that if he dared to play unfairly, he would show who is the most important person here. Jelly Ween said that the assistant in question is now walking beside Lu Bo. Jelly Ween said that he has Wuxia technique. The guy himself is young, and some masters even think that they can't beat him. Jelly Ween was certain that some kind of jade detecting method he definitely had. He got angry, and asked if people still believed it because his organization had forbidden to talk about it 30 years ago, and said he would bat, speaking on their behalf and prove that there was no technique. And they realized that everything was going according to their plan. The crowd started cheering for the master and invited them into the millionaire's zone. At the same time, in the millionaire's zone, Lu Bo asked if the man was interested in the restoration of Nianhua shopping streets. The man said he could help him if he met with the committee tomorrow. The interlocutor agreed to the proposal and shook Lu Bo's hand. Suddenly, Lu Bo turned his head toward the source of the sound. As it turned out, a master company came to the millionaire zones. Lu Bo said that it was a group that didn't know how to lose. After the company entered the hall, Mr. Bao said that is where he was. At the same time, he was chatting with some man. Suddenly, he opened his eyes abruptly. The protagonist was surprised that the wizard was getting closer and closer to the protagonist. It wasn't long before they were within speaking distance and standing face to face. The master aggressively approached the protagonist and asked if he was the man with the technique. Right after that, the master was insulted by Lu Bo, saying that he was a snake bullying his buddy, and called him a tumor of the industry. Lu Bo asked the protagonist if this old man was seriously mad at them. He said he didn't know about the old man, and surely the 2 idiots next to him had put them up to some nonsense, and that was the only reason the master was so aggressive towards them. Lu Bo said to forget about it to the protagonist. After all, Men don't like people like them the most. Then she turned to the protagonist and said that since they had already started their tactics, they should improvise and adapt. He squinted his eyes and turned to the old man, saying that he had probably listened to other people's opinions and went straight to attacking others without thinking about what was said. The man was extremely offended by such a statement of the protagonist, and asked if his parents had brought him up badly. And if that was the case, it is now clear why he deceived his buddies. He turned to Lu Bo and asked who he was. Lu Bo said that even though it seemed like a familiar face, however, millions of people from all over the world come here to see the exhibition. The master told them not to even ask who he was because he wouldn't say it. The man said that his name was Kun Wezhen from Xiaoyang, and he had already studied geology for 50 years and was friends with the local boss Jellybin. After that, the man turned to the protagonist and said, "Didn't they cheat people out of 60 million? And Lu Bo squinted his eyes and said that just a second ago, the man didn't want to introduce himself. Kun Wezhen said that he could do whatever he wanted because they were in the millionaire's zone. After that, Kun Wezhen asked why he wasn't playing or if he wanted to cheat again. Lu Bo was very offended by this statement and thought that he had already called him a snake and a cheat several times. He said if the old man wanted to play, they could make it happen because they had enough money. Lu Bo looked at the man and said that they should play then. Kun Wezhen said that young people have become frivolous, and then he should not be accused of bullying the younger generation. After that, Kun Wezhen said that he would show what it means to respect elders. He squinted his eyes and took offense at the emphasis on seniority. He looked at Kun Wezhen and told him to stop bullshitting. He said something about what they would play depends on them, and he should stop talking nonsense because they haven't played yet. Kun Wezhen was even more offended by the main character's suggestion. After that, Kun Wezhen coughed and said that he was curious whether he had not been taught to respect his elders, since he did not do so at all. He got even more offended, and with a burning flame in his eyes said that if he would shut me up, he would beat him here. The old man was instantly frightened by such an ominous aura and couldn't say a word. Lu Bo was also extremely surprised by the main character's killing intent and didn't understand anything. While all the people watched, he closed his eyes to calm himself. When at last the master regained the power of speech, he said it was as if death hung over him. At the same time, Jellyween leaned over to the master and said what they should do. Kun Wezhen repeated that he knows this game, and they choose one of the 3 stones, then everything will be clear. He said he's okay with this game. Kun Wezhen told the protagonist not to worry because this competition is fair, and since the amount is large, they need a judge. Suddenly, someone volunteered to be the judge, and Kun Wezhen instantly looked back. As it turned out, there stood several men who were interested in becoming judges. Suddenly, the director of the exhibition came up to them and told them that he would also be a judge, and not to worry. Everyone was surprised at the unusual arrival of a man who normally doesn't show his face. Literally at the same moment, Li Jinhua joined the argument and said that she too would be a judge.